is going on, Rotogrinders? Dean here at Steen 7904 if you want to get all tactical on me. It is 10:10 on the East Coast, 7:10 on the West Coast, 9:10 Tennessee time, which is time of the flagship show here at Rotogrinders. It's called Grinderslive. Join me today, as they will be the entire football season. This is the start of a 3-hour block that is all free. Following us today, later on today, well, it's going to be at, let's see if I can do my math correctly, 11:20. If you want to get all technical there, it's going to be Noto along with Toe Tag and Tambo. And following them, you got Chief Meteorologist Kevin Roth along with Creighton and Mr. Tuttle taking you guys all up the lock. Everything is free. If you're premium members, we had a show recorded earlier today with one tip and pick from Football Guys. You guys know him from last year's several years. I used to do a show with him. It was good times for sure. SDL Cards has a show. He's also on that show as well. And Dan Bach TV. So if you guys are premium members at some point, you'll want to watch that. Feel free to fire away on that one. But that said, joining me, I'm going to give the introduction to our new contestant this year. You know him from such things as the Six Pack and his man grooming breeds for commercials. What's going on, Beer?
Little manscaping, Dean. Come on, get it right here. I mean, that's important stuff here. So good to be here. You know, we've talked about, are we going to have a football season or not? We finally made it. Feels like Christmas morning. Grant came in hot with a mohawk. So let's talk some football. I'm ready.
Yeah, super pumped, super excited. Devin's going to go ahead and drop this link in chat for you guys who y'all are not aware. There's a link to get the RG Core 4 Premium to get a discount on your first month. The Core 4 sports that we're talking about. Golf has cracked the Core 4. Of course, NFL is in there. Baseball and basketball is also in the Core 4 too. There's plenty of contests. There's a basketball game today. I believe it's a basketball game at 1 o'clock. It's happening for sure. We're talking football, of course, today. Grant, nice mohawk. I'm sure the people in chat are thoroughly impressed. Hey, chat, what's going on, dude? Like, subscribe. Much appreciate that. Yeah, smash the like. What do you prefer? What's your adjective of choice, Grant, as far as the like button?
Push.
Is that an option? I don't know. All right.
I don't know.
It is now.
Push the button.
Grant, are we excited? You were the first one to yell about the being football. You're so excited you got yourself an egg McMuffin this morning, or maybe it was a sausage.
I got myself 3. Okay, first of all, I don't need to pay an extra $2 for an egg. That's ridiculous. That is not accurate of market prices. But yes, I got myself hash browns and egg and sausage McMuffins, and I put grape jelly on them because I'm a genius. And Dean, has anyone ever told you seem like a guy that would use your Manscaped on your balls and then shortly after on your face just to save time?
I did just shave like a half hour ago, but no, nobody's ever told me that. I mean,
you look like that kind of guy.
Not in that precise phrasing, in a roundabout way. But there you go. Hey, chat's talking about Cobra Kai for another time, but Cobra Kai is a lot of fun. We got to talk some football. We're here for the next 57 minutes or so, give or take. And again, all 3 hours, all the way up to lock. Stay here at RG because it's free. And there is a premium show that has been recorded if you guys want to hear what Tip and Pick has to say, Super Sharp Guy, SDO Cards, and DB. I'm going to give my same speech I gave every single year, Beer. And it's even kind of sort of modified. Like, we are all Jon Snow. We know nothing when it comes into week 1. We think we know. We don't really know. And it's groupthink, and it's the best week ever for being different and best week ever for being contrarian. And now you compound that with what's going on as far as, all these rookies have limited practices. How do you – it feels like however good it is for a contrarian for week 1 normally, it's even better because of all the sort of funkiness that's happening, the lack of practice and yada, yada, the lack of beat writers getting the information. So your thoughts on that, and how are you handling that as far as week 1?
Yeah, it's definitely magnified without a preseason, without any of that information to go off of. We're kind of going in blind here, and, a lot of season long, a lot of best ball takes. We'll drift into DFS here. So I think, honestly, the biggest thing you can do is keep an eye on the ownership projections. You see guys heavily owned. You got to decide. Are you going to take an overweight stance, an underweight stance, a fade? I think that's very, very important this week. And we'll be tweaking our Sierra Rotogrinders all the way up until that 1 o'clock lock. So that's what I'm kind of doing, Dean, is trying to look at some games that people aren't on, some of the total ownership in a game. There's a few games I'm looking at that we're going to talk about where people just seem to be ignoring it. Everyone's going to kind of congregate at certain games, and supposed to be social distancing here, Dean. So I want to be apart from the pack. I want to keep my 6 foot plus of separation and find some of these under the radar spots.
What an applicable analogy in today's age.
I'm here for you, Grant.
You have anything to add to that, Grant, as far as that basically your strategy as well?
Play everyone.
Well, that's a terrible – what do you mean, like 10% everybody? I've heard somebody once say that that's an awful idea.
Yeah, no, that guy was stupid. No, like I'm So I literally have ownership. Like, there's all sorts of different sites out there. I have ownership at every single quarterback on the slate today in a game stack of every single game, because every single year there is one team, almost always Ryan Fitzpatrick, which he's going to win a Millie Maker, that wins a Millie Maker every single year. There's always one game that we don't expect to go off that just goes absolutely nuts the first week of the season. There's always a few really low ownership wide receivers that end up taking down, like our RB standard deviation about where things are going to go aren't that drastic at the beginning of the season. We know that this year is a little bit different, that there hasn't been much of an off season, that we don't know who's going to be able to fully be entrenched in the offense as far as running back are concerned. But there's always a wide receiver. Last year was McLaurin. Last year was Jackson. Last year was Watkins, that goes off like crazy the first week of the season. And it's always someone that has either been well past their prime, or it's a person that's new to an offense, or a just rookie wide receiver. So getting a little bit of ownership and all the possibilities, for instance, the Oakland wide receivers, I think is a great call on today's slate. You don't have to go heavy on them, but get a little bit of ownership on them in those big field competitions like the Millie Maker, like the big competition over on Yahoo, FanDuel. Like FanDuel, you can literally play whatever you want with salary. Cash game on FanDuel to build is just the easiest thing in the world, and really the only
good players. Yeah. We'll talk. We'll talk about both those sites. We'll even talk. We're going to sprinkle in some Yahoo. I was talking to you guys about this pre-show. We're definitely not sponsored by Yahoo, but it is worth noting. I feel like it's an obligation to tell the people here. They are running a $500,000 contest over there. Yeah, some people are going to be mad at me because like, don't tell the people we want all the overlay.
Shut your mouth. Shut your mouth when you're talking, Dean.
Well, wait. Is that Wedding Crashers?
Yeah, it is Wedding Crashers. Good pull, Dino.
So $500K total prize pool over there, 57,000 total entrance, limit at 150 as far as the max, and they're currently basically at 43% overlay. And also their management fee is lower anyway. If it did fill up, it's 12.2%. So yeah, I think you should play at Yahoo today. I think it's one of the best places to play that contest. I would be shocked if it filled. I would be shocked if there wasn't at least some overlay. And I'm definitely going to be running. I'm running like 150. I think why not? Sure, let's have a good time. Let's have some fun over there. As far as some injuries, as far as the body parts, I don't actually have the body parts noted, but I do have the guys that are in, the guys that are out. And oh no, I just accidentally closed all my pages, and I'll be very upset. That tells me for sure. Miles Sanders is out. That's a big one, obviously. Mike Williams expected to give it a go. Mike Evans has done the hokey pokey as far as being in and out, and now I think is he questionable now or expected to play? We shall see. Jalen Rieger is expected to play as well. David Montgomery also probable. N'Keal Harry probable. And understand that I would imagine the actives and inactives come out as usual an hour and a half before kickoff. So 11:30, the people should have that. Weather. Let's note the weather. Chief Meteorologist Kevin Ruffalo, of course, will be on at 12:30 up the lock. We're going to go ahead and drop that link in chat for you guys as far as the weather report. If you guys want to take a look at that. There's some potential air issues out there in San Francisco. There's been rumblings, at least been thrown out there, that the possibility that game does not go. We shall see. Hopefully, if it gets canceled, we'll know. I'm not saying it is, but just be aware. Also, Tevin Coleman has a sickle cell, so there's a chance he may not give it a go because that could hurt him as well, and that could open things up a little more opportunity for a guy like Mostert. Again, stay tuned on that. That is a late game. All right, we're going to break it down position by position. I think L-Jax, Beer, what are we doing with Lamar Jackson from a cash game perspective? This is kind of one of those, depending on where you're shopping. On FanDuel, I think he's very, very easy to play in your cash games. On DK, I think it's one of the big decision points as far as the slate. Pretty easy on Yahoo as well, too. Your thoughts as far as Lamar?
Yeah, that's it. Where are you playing? FanDuel, if you're rolling in without Lamar, I don't know what you're doing. Of course, there's other options we're going to talk about, more so for tournaments, just to be different. But in cash over there, it's definitely Lamar. DraftKings, they made it tough. They priced him up a little bit, and it's almost a question of, do you want McCaffrey? Do you want Thomas? Do you want Lamar? I mean, it's going to be tough to get all of them. There is some value that we'll talk about, but you got to make a decision, and that's what we want. That's DFS. So let's make you make some tough choices here. FanDuel, you pretty much get whoever you want. Yahoo, pretty easy as well. I hate going into a slate, Dean, without any Lamar. I'll say that. So, there's a lot of ways you can go at quarterback. It's a position where we don't worry about the ownership as much as some of the other positions. It tends to spread out amongst a bunch of guys, but the upside, the ceiling is just so much higher than anybody else gives you. So Cash, I think that's the way to go. I think DraftKings, you can definitely go cheaper in cash games. Tournament, you always want exposure to Lamar in almost any matchup.
Your thoughts, Grant, as far as Lamar, basically a 2-for-1 quarterback and running back all in one for the price of one. Pretty expensive on DK, and the price is, 1K more than Wilson, who's 7K with Aaron DK. And we sort of talked about it on FanDuel. It's not that much. It's much easier to make it work over there. I think he's your cash game quarterback. The ceiling is just immense, obviously. Big team total as well. What are you doing with Lamar Jackson? Currently at projected as far as our ownership, and our ownership is fluid. We still have several hours until lock, so these things will change. But we're seeing 14% ownership. I rounded up 13.9% if you want to get all technical on DK. Gonna fire up the FanDuel in a second. Your thoughts here, Grant, as far as Lamar Jackson?
I mean, it's really simple. You play him in cash. I'm not playing him in tournaments, at least not much. He's has the highest floor, he has the highest ceiling, he has the rushing upside over on DK. He obviously has a chance for 100-yard rushing bonus and the passing bonus. He's a guy that is going to get some points, a good amount of points. It's a lot easier to fade him over on DraftKings than it is over on FanDuel, over on Yahoo. But in cash, he's pretty much the guy I'm rolling with all across the board here. I don't really care how things turn out because I'm predominantly going to have very low ownership of him in tournaments, but in cash, he's absolutely the guy to go with. Tournaments, you can easily get away with paying down for some other guys. The chalk build is going to be Lamar Jackson, and it's going to be two cheap running backs, probably Scott and Antonio Gibson, and that's just how it's going to go. So differentiate yourself in tournaments by fading Lamar, but there's a lot of good QB plays on the board, a lot of QBs that can end up outscoring him, and you get the correlation with other QBs more than you do with Jackson. So in tournaments, like Jackson could go for 30. He might not be the only person that goes for 30, but if he goes for 30, decent chance that he ends up going for 30 with 2-3 passing touchdowns, and that's it. And we don't really know who it's going to, so it's easier to correlate with other guys. So it's very advantageous in big field tournaments to fade Lamar.
Maybe I'm wrong, but I think, and hopefully my gain is all good. My volume was kind of funky before. Hopefully we're good to go.
You sound louder now.
Well, yeah, that's how gain works.
Welcome in, Dean. Welcome in.
It's good to have you on the show.
You were saying before about the whole Manscaped thing. Nobody said that to me either, and nobody says ever I'm being too quiet. I'm generally pretty loud. But I think there's a path where you could just play naked L-Jax where he just runs in 2 touchdowns and sure throws for 200 yards or something like that, but runs for 100 and runs 2 in as well. You don't necessarily need his pass catchers, but of course pairing with some of his pass catchers can work out great as well. Grant, don't hold out on us. Like, give me the pivots. And by the way, I pulled up the ownership on FanDuel, and it's much more condensed as far as the quarterbacks, again, because it's easier to get the good ones. 18% we're seeing as far as ownership there on FanDuel. Give me your favorite tournament pivots at quarterback, Grant.
At quarterback, there's quite a few guys that I like. Like I said, I'm going to be playing most guys, but the ones that specifically I want to play are going to be, first off, Cam Newton. New offense, new quarterback. I don't think he's a downgrade from Tom Brady. It's a very different system for him, and like Belichick is the one guy that knows how to scheme very well for anyone. His system is fantastic. It's been fantastic for a while. He gets a matchup versus Miami, who maybe improved on the defensive end, but still I don't think is going to be that great of a defense. Newton has huge upside. If he is healthy, he can rush the ball. He can get in rushing touchdowns. Newton is an absolutely fantastic tournament play, and he's only coming in at a projected 6% ownership right now. I hate to say it, but Haskins is a decent play just because they may be slinging the ball. We don't really know what Gibson is going to be like in this offense. There's a lot of speculations he's going to be heavily owned, so pivoting off to Haskins, hoping that Gibson doesn't end up with a touchdown, and they are coming from behind pretty much the entire game and going to have to chuck the ball a lot. Haskins looked terrible for the majority of last season, but different system in there, different coach, different everything. He could be in for a big season this year. I don't think so, but it's week 1. Things are unknown. He's 5K. He's a guy that you can definitely end up using. Trubisky going up against Detroit. Trubisky has massive games all the time, or not all the time, a lot more often than you think. Like, you look at his game log, and while he may be a trash quarterback, he'll occasionally put up Millie Maker winning scores. 33 versus Dallas last season, 27 the second matchup versus Detroit. The end of the season, he was averaging over 40 passes per game, and he could absolutely be in that spot here. Great way to correlate it with Marvin Jones over on the other side, assuming that the Detroit Lions get up big and they're forced to pass the ball. We don't know how healthy Montgomery is. We know he's going to play, but if Cohen's more involved in the offense, another guy that you can correlate very well. Tyrod Taylor, new quarterback, and in the Chargers organization. You know, he was there last year, but he didn't really play too much. We don't know what he's going to be. He hasn't really had as good of pass catchers as he does right now. He's got Keenan Allen. Mike Williams is going to give it a go. He's got Eckler. He's got Hunter Henry. He's got a lot of weapons. He's gotten a little bit older. He's gotten a little bit more experience. He could absolutely be a great quarterback. I don't know if he's going to, but Chargers quarterbacks, which has just been Rivers for years, have a tendency to put up a large amount of points, and he gives you that rushing upside that you haven't experienced with Rivers because he's slower than I am, which is saying something.
That's post those McMuffins too.
Yeah. No, I could slam 10 McMuffins and beat him in a 40. And then my favorite quarterback on the slate, I bet you know who it is.
Well, you said Ryan Fitzpatrick is going to win somebody $1 million today. Is that you're implying that you play New England defense? Is that what you're talking about? We're getting ahead of ourselves as far as defense, but
he can put up 5 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. It's real simple. Ryan Fitzpatrick.
You still Winston. Winston was great to stack it. Play Winston and play the defense he's playing against. So go ahead.
Yeah, no, Fitzpatrick, like we saw what he did in Miami towards the end of the season last year, like was putting up pretty big numbers. We look at the last 2 weeks of the season, or last 5-6 weeks of the season. He had 4 games of over 25 points. He had multiple 30-point games. He got a lot more of a connection with Parker. Williams is going to be back in the offense. Gesicki's going to have another year under him. They're improved most everywhere this year. Fitzpatrick is a guy that's going to chuck the ball. He's absolutely going to be slinging in. So many of the Patriots had guys opt out over the offseason because of COVID. Like their defense is not the same as it was last year. We saw him play them at the last week last year and put up 27 points. The Patriots going up against the Dolphins, it's always a weird situation. It's always weird. I like the Dolphins to actually win today.
Oh, wow.
I think Fitzpatrick goes for a massive game here. I think Parker, Williams, and Gesicki all have a chance at a huge game. I really like this passing offense. Fitzpatrick is my highest owned quarterback. We have him pegged at less than 1% ownership. I think he takes down the Millie Maker today, and I absolutely love this man. Plus, I don't know if you know this, he's very virile.
Yeah, the beard thing might be, I guess, maybe the correlation there. You might have a soft spot for Fitzpatrick.
Did you know he went to Harvard?
No, what? Wait, he went to Harvard and he plays football?
Yeah, there's where the correlations go away. Grant and Harvard couldn't be more further apart there. The beard, yes. Harvard.
I got into Harvard. Granted, I forged my entire application.
Did you know Antonio Gates played basketball?
What? Yes. Did you know Jimmy Graham did that?
What? It's almost like there's a correlation with tight ends. Beer, Grant said a lot there. I agree with actually some of that. I say that like it's surprising.
I actually agree with you in some scenarios of the 7 quarterbacks you listed.
You fired a bunch out. I do think Washington quarterback Haskins is pretty interesting, especially this is DK, more of a DK centric thing where I'm finding myself. It's a huge decision point, and it's not a 1v1. It's like a 3v3 because it's the way it trickles down as far as making your lineup construction. But as far as I don't know if he's cash game playable, and you mentioned T-Mobile as well too. As a possibility. I think Cam's kind of interesting as well too. As a cheapie that just kind of build around as far as your cash game lineup on DK, and that's kind of where I'm finding myself going all the way up or going all the way down. Most likely, we shall see. That's a fluid decision as well as far as my lineups. But Beer, I think continuity more so than ever. Week 1, and we talked about how the limited practices and the teams that have less turnover is something I'm kind of sort of betting on, and the chat's talking about that as well too. And I think Haskins takes a step forward, and I don't think he was as bad as people want to say he was last year. I also say that too. I think he gets a bad rap. So I in 5K, I think he's 5K on DK.
Yep.
Yeah, he's super interesting for tournaments. I don't think it's completely nuts for cash. Probably not. You shouldn't. But I don't think it's insane if it gets you everything else you want. Your thoughts as far as some of the guys that Grant threw out there, and feel free to add some new names.
So I agree on Haskins. It's as ugly as it is. He wasn't that bad, Dean. You're right. Towards the end of the year, he actually performed pretty well. So easy to pair him up with a McLaurin. Even a Logan Thomas is super cheap on DraftKings, and that kind of gets you away. If you're worried about Gibson, and some of the ownership is dropping off of Gibson with Boston Scott now in the starting lineup for Philly. So we're not as worried about Gibson's ownership, but it's a way to get a little different in that game to go with Haskins. A couple ways you can pair him up. So I don't mind that at all. I think that game is very stackable. I agree on Cam Newton. Now, that's not a continuity one, but and you don't even need to stack him with anybody. It's hard to look around and find somebody you feel great about. I mean, yes, you can make a case for Edelman. I don't even think you need to go there. In fact, I like going to the other side and pairing him with a Preston Williams, and that's your kind of run it back. Then you don't have to worry about Fitzpatrick. I know Grant likes him, but I can still capture some of that upside without all the interceptions and turnovers. So I do like Cam. One guy I want to add here, Dean, Jimmy Garoppolo, and no one's really talking about him. I know that, there's concerns, does that game go or not? That's certainly something we're going to have to keep an eye on, but this guy threw for over 700 yards, 8 touchdowns against this Arizona team, bottom 6 in the league in DVOA against the pass. I didn't see any major upgrades in that Arizona defense. So I know he's lacking weapons, but Kittle against Arizona, a slam dunk. I'm sure we're going to talk about that. A couple different ways you compare him. Kendrick Bourne, under the radar receiver, but I really like Jimmy G here. I know it's a running team, but very high team total here. Nobody's going to be on him, and I love the matchup.
Your favorite outside of Kittle, who's your favorite guy to pair with Garoppolo?
Definitely Kendrick Bourne. You talk about continuity. It looks like Brandon Ayuk's going to go, but there's not any continuity there with him missing practices. We know Debo's out, so it's going to be a lot of Kittle. And Bourne's a guy that scored in both of these games against Arizona last season. So not a sexy name, not a name you get overly excited to play, but a guy that's been there. They've had a good rapport all summer long. So I like Kendrick Bourne kind of under the radar as a pairing.
What about Matt Ryan and Wilson, 49 total in that game in a dome?
Yeah, they're both in play. You could stack that game 100 different ways, and I think you're going to see people do that. So it's being creative, being selective, kind of being different with those stacks. You're going to get a lot of different ways that people stack that game up. So maybe, some of the secondary guys that may go overlooked, the Calvin Ridley, Chris Carson on the other side. Everybody's going to go Russ and Lockett and Metcalf and Julio and Ryan. I think Hayden Hurst will be popular. So some of those other plays in that game that could definitely go off, have as big of a ceiling as some of those other guys, but the ownership just won't be there.
Final thoughts as far as quarterback, Grant? Is there somebody you're taking a stand on outside of Fitzpatrick? Somebody you're significantly overweight on? Somebody you're just crossing out just because of ownership reasons, or you think they're just going to be overvalued for whatever reason?
Not anyone I'm really crossing out. Like I said, I'm playing a lot of guys, but stand obviously Fitzpatrick, and second one would probably be Trubisky. Like I'll be way overweight on him. I really like him today. Like he has I'm looking for big upside guys, and the two biggest upside guys on the entire slate are Fitzpatrick and Trubisky on a point per dollar basis.
Oh, well, you had to add that qualifier. I'm like, well, isn't it LJAX? But yeah, okay, fair enough. You want to do dollar for dollar, it's a whole other conversation. But at some point, raw points matter too. What about Josh Allen? That's usually your boy. But my issue with him is, like, I don't know how much he has to do today. I don't know if the Jets can keep up. And again, we don't know these things. We're just kind of guessing, but we think that Buffalo shouldn't have an issue beating them. And of course, there's also weather issues there. We're currently seeing 15 to 20 mile per hour winds as far as gusts, and obviously a low total there. I like Allen, but like it's DFS, Grant, and daily fantasy sports. We care about today and today only. Maybe next week. I don't know if they're playing next week. No idea. But this week I'm mostly off them. Your thoughts?
Josh Allen at home stats is probably some of the worst in the league. Like, I think
is that a thing? Home and road? You think? Well, Buffalo's a tough place to play, but go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, very specifically, it's because Buffalo has terrible weather. Like you said, there's going to be wind. It's just not great weather today. Anytime there is great weather in Buffalo, yeah, absolutely play him. But predominantly, I try and stick to him on the road. 190 yards passing per game at home last season. I think 250 on the road. He's been a good quarterback on the road. Obviously, has that rushing upside, and Diggs is going to help him in this offense. I will have a little bit of him, but it's just not a spot where I really need to play him. There's too many other good options on the slate. He's still going to draw some ownership because he is Josh Allen, one of the greatest QBs in the world. Well, and fantasy QBs, absolutely.
Fantasy QBs. Okay.
I didn't realize that was implied, but go ahead.
And one of the greatest real life QBs in the world. Gosh, I love that
now
guy.
We're stretching it.
But it's real simple. Like weather plays a huge role with him, especially wind. He's a guy that loves to throw the ball deep. Now he actually has a route runner that can get to where he's supposed to be at any given time, which I think is going to pay huge dividends with him. And I just don't think this is the spot. I still, like I said, have a little bit of ownership in him, but not nearly as much as I generally do. It's just because he's playing in Buffalo and there's a little bit of wind, and I just don't really feel like week one is the week where I really need to go with him.
Yeah, looking at the chat, they're throwing out Teddy Bridgewater, another new quarterback in a new situation, and I stressed about continuity. And, like, of course, I'll make exceptions to the rule. I'm not really on Teddy today. What are your thoughts, Beer? And then close out quarterback. Anything else we haven't really touched on?
That was actually the game I was going to bring up. That it seems nobody's really on outside of the running backs. We're seeing very low ownership on the Vegas receivers. DJ Moore, very low ownership. So I built a few different stacks of that game. I think you can go to both quarterbacks. I prefer Teddy over Carr, but there's a lot of value in that game, and those defenses are both terrible. So I do like Teddy. It kind of closes it out, though. Guys that I'm avoiding, I'm not playing Aaron Rodgers against Minnesota. He's never played well in Minnesota, doesn't play well against that defense, so kind of avoiding him. It's really the big avoid here. I'm not playing much Josh Allen, more so for some of the things you mentioned, Dean. Just not sure how much that team's going to have to do. I think they win it on the ground with their defense. Could be an ugly game. Weather's looking a little better than projected, but that one could get ugly as well. So I do like Teddy. I do like some of those low and pass catchers. A lot of upside with guys like Curtis Samuel, Robbie Anderson, of course, DJ Moore.
Yeah, Roth, of course, will update his weather later on. He'll be on at 12:30. That's free for everybody in case you guys are joining late. We're free all the way up to lock today. Let's jump to running back, and Boston Scott is projected to be the most heavily owned running back on the. Of course, he is. 41% on DK as far as the ownership. The DK, the cap is pretty tight. It's worth noting that they're no longer 3K running backs, at least week one. I presume that's the way it's going to be going forward. 4K is the floor, and Scott's not 4K. He's 4.8, I believe, 4.7 on FanDuel, 4.5, I believe, is their floor as well as far as their running backs. He's 39% projected on FanDuel. Of course, we touched on it earlier. Sanders is out. Beer, running backs in Philadelphia, trying to predict that situation historically has not been fun. Clement is lurking. They have another body as well, too, for what it's worth, and I'm losing the name in my head for some reason. I'm sure you know it, and I don't. I'm stalling, and I'm just saying words as I'm scrolling. Jason Huntley is a person that will play running back potentially for the Eagles today. What are you doing with Boston Scott?
I think you play him. I think you go overweight here. I mean, I'm not worried about Huntley, even Clement. Yeah, he's going to get some touches here, but we've seen this scenario before, and Boston Scott's been very good in that scenario. It's going to get a ton of work. It's different than an Antonio Gibson situation. We've seen Boston Scott. We've seen him be in this role, and we've seen him be productive. Antonio Gibson's kind of the other side of that, where we don't know. There's unknown upside there for sure. This guy could be great. He could be a bust, and a lot of people left holding the bag. So Scott, I know he's going to be very highly owned, so there's always a case in tournaments. You can easily get away from him, especially on FanDuel. It's just so easy to make a lineup there where I don't think you need to eat that ownership there. But DraftKings with the full PPR, I think you can go overweight here and still feel pretty good about it. Even at a 40% ownership, this is the position, a workhorse type running back that's too cheap can generally be very tough to get away from. So I'm still going to be playing him a ton, try to be over the field. I think matching the field doesn't make any sense. You either go really heavy on him or you take an underweight or a fade approach here. But 40% ownership is not going to scare me away from a potential workload against a defense. He can do some damage in the passing game as well. I just love the matchup here. Just too cheap, hard to get away from.
Yeah, I mean, he's almost definitely going to be in my cash games, tournaments. Of course, a case can be made. And Gibson on the other side, there's 4 running backs on the Washington side. Peyton Barber, McKissick's there. They have Bryce Love. They cut Peterson, and Peterson, there's a quote where he said basically they love Gibson and they want him to be the guy. And Gibson's a guy that didn't run a ton in college. He might just catch 7 passes today, which is another route to get there, and maybe run the ball 7 times. I don't know. Earlier in the week, before the Miles Sanders thing went down, he was sort of, he was the chalky guy, and now I think people are pivoting to Scott over Gibson. I suppose you can play them both. I'm probably not doing that, but I can see a route if you want to load up in other spots. Grant, what are you doing with Scott? And then let's pivot. Let's bring Gibson into the conversation as well.
With Scott, even though Beers doesn't like it, I'm probably going with the field. It's real simple. You play him in lineups where it's very contrarian otherwise, and then you play him in don't play him in chalkier lineups that are chalky otherwise. So that's basically where I'm at. I don't have a strong take. Obviously, it's DFS. Anything can happen. Anytime you get a player that's 41% owned, it makes it a little bit rougher. I'm definitely using them in cash across all websites. It's just simple. You have to do it. But in tournaments, I'm probably going to be on the field and just make my lineups that are contrarian with him in it, and then not contrarian without him in it. And that's just how it's going to end up going. Outside of him, there's obviously Gibson and Jacobs are going to be 2 of the chalkiest guys on the entire slate. I think that Gibson is fine. With Scott in there, his ownership is going to go down drastically where he's a little bit more in play. Jacobs should be in for a big workload, probably going to catch a decent amount of balls out of the backfield. Carolina, not the greatest run defense in the world. Jacobs is definitely a guy we can use. I don't know what the question was after Scott.
Yeah, it's okay. But Devin, our fabulous multitasking producer, he's showing on the screen. He's giving you guys a peek at some of the premium stuff going on here at RG. And he's also dropping the link if you guys want to partake in the premium. You get I believe it's $5 off the Core 4, which includes NFL, which is football. That's what we're talking about here. That's good times. Golf, basketball, and baseball, which still has several weeks going on. And, of course, it's going to be a big playoff there. All right, check out that link. Devin's going to drop in there. And, again, we're checking out the ownership as well, too. What I was asking you about, Grant, was and by the way, I do agree with that thought. Is like, and not to say that beer is wrong, but I do agree with the thought. Like, you don't necessarily have to make a decision. You could just go with the field and say, "I'll beat you in other spots." Like, you don't have to make a decision. I understand why people do it. They take a stand. Taking a stand is a thing that people. It makes sense. You got to pick your spots, but I just don't know. And like, I'm with you, Grant. I'm like, I probably will be with the field. I mean, it might be a little bit over, probably not under. Your thoughts on Gibson, Grant? You didn't really give that. And is anybody considering Clement as a contrarian? Because there's a possibility that Clement can do some things. Anybody?
I mean, yeah, there's a possibility that he could do some stuff, but is it going to do enough to get you there? I don't think so. I mean, you'd have to snake 2 touchdowns from Scott, or you have to get very involved in the passing game, which Scott's a very good guy in the passing game. So no, not really going to go with Clement. Gibson, he's cheap. I'm using him in cash as of the moment. It's just a pricing play, and now that Scott's on the board, I was gonna full on fade him in tournaments because we don't really know. Like, we don't know exactly how he's going to be entrenched in this offense. We saw CEH get a whole significant role in the first game of the year, but this has been a year without much of a training camp. We know that according to Peterson, they are high on him. They could give him a decent workload, but we don't know that for sure. And they may bring him in slowly. Obviously, they're not going to be in the playoff hunt, or more than likely not going to be in playoff hunt this year. So there's not a real reason to give him way too many touches every single week. This isn't Carolina, who just wants to play McCaffrey every single time, although Rivera is over there now. But it's just a spot where I'm probably going to use a bit of him. I don't know how much. I don't have a strong take on him.
All right, Beer. McCaffrey was brought up. We'll talk about the other studs in a second, like Cook and Kamara and Jacobs, and some of these guys just got paid, by the way. Good for them. McCaffrey is $10K on DK. Look, we're living in a time where, bell cow running backs is not necessarily a thing, but McCaffrey's certainly been that guy. They would have had some games where he would never come off the field every single snap. New regime there in Carolina. I think it's at least possible. He only gets like 85% of the snaps, which is not 100. It's still good. And also the cap is pretty tight on DK. FanDuel, he's so easy to play. He's so easy to play in your cash games, of course, in tournaments. Whole other conversation. But again, this is one of the big decision points for me in making cash game lineups on DK. And I make multiple, so I'm sure I'll go different routes. How much are you prioritizing McCaffrey when you consider, hey, we live in the world of a salary cap?
You can definitely get away with them not having him. There's a lot of options that are a lot cheaper, especially in that kind of 600 to 7,500 range. I mean, we talked about Jacobs. I think as a smash play today. There's other guys in that range that you could get away from them. I think you definitely want to be different in tournament cash games. FanDuel, you lock them in. Simple. DraftKings, again, it comes down to, do you want Lamar? Do you want Michael Thomas? If not, I think you go that route. But in tournaments, I promise you, you're going to see McCaffrey, Gibson, Scott. That's going to be a 3-pack of running backs for a lot of people today. It's a way for them to eat up the Christian McCaffrey price and still play some other guys and stacks. So if you're going to play him, just don't go that route. Maybe find some cheaper receivers, play a couple more of those mid-range running backs, a cheaper quarterback, a Haskins, a Trubisky. Just be different there, because that threesome's going to be very, very heavily owned in tournaments. So McCaffrey's another guy, Dean, kind of like Lamar. I don't want to really go in to tournaments without some exposure. So I have a pretty good amount of McCaffrey. I like this matchup, and I don't think they will scale his workload back. Maybe early in the season they do, but there's been a lot of talk. They want to get this guy more involved than last season. So a smash spot here against Oakland. I'm going to have plenty of McCaffrey today.
Yeah, and just as a general thought, no preseason, and somebody threw it out there the other day, one of the beat writers or somebody, just that some teams might be rotating their studs in and out a little bit more so than they would normally, just, going from 0 to full throttle, which is just, and I would imagine coaches have different philosophies and different teams are going to do different things, and I don't know who's going to do what. Beer, I'm going to stay with you because you mentioned guys in the mid-tier, and the name was thrown out there earlier, and I think this is one of my favorite plays in cash, upper mid-tier running backs, not at the spot of McCaffrey, but Josh Jacobs is 6.8K. I know we want pass catching receivers on DK. We kind of stress that, but the price still, it seems like it's baked in. He's not this great pass catcher. And also there's talk of him, again, who knows? We shall see. We'll see what happens on the field. And this Carolina defense is not expected to be good. I think he goes over 100 yards. So I'll get those 3 points as far as the bonus. He's going to catch something, right? He has to catch a couple passes, I would imagine. I'm prioritizing Jacobs on DK. What say you?
Same. And the ownership's kind of trending upwards as it should. I mean, this is one of those spots. Chalk is chalk for a reason sometimes because the guy is such a good play. And this may be the only week we get to use Jacobs, Dean. I know we've talked a lot of them throughout the summer, and some of my concerns were the schedule. And I know that means nothing for DFS, but this matchup here is the one you kind of circle, whether you like them or not, coming into the season. Carolina, I mean, they were historically bad against the run, and it wasn't even close between them and the second worst team against the run. There was a huge gap there. I don't see major changes on this defense. So whether he's going to get passing game work or not, yes, it's a bonus. Yes, we obviously want that on DraftKings, but this is a 2-3 touchdown kind of upside play here against this team. They're favored on the road. The total's high. And this is a game I want a lot of exposure to with the running backs. And again, with some of the pass catchers and quarterbacks even, but Jacobs and cash makes sense on both sites. FanDuel is a little pricey at 8,200, but DraftKings, he feels too cheap at 68.
Yeah, FanDuel prioritizes those touchdowns, doesn't care as much for receptions over there. Grant, jump in here as far as these guys. Jacobs, and then we have to add Kamara to the conversation, Eckler to the conversation, Mixon into the conversation. And there's, Dalvin Cook, another guy who just got paid as well too. It's hard to separate these guys, and maybe you can just play the ownership game, and we're seeing as far as the ownership projection, depending on where you're shopping. Cook on DK, we're seeing at 8.4% ownership.
That's crazy.
That seems really. I want to be over that. I think that's a really, really good tournament play. Your thought, and of course, Kamara, it plays great on DK because he's a guy who can actually catch 10 actual passes. He can get there. He can get the double bonus in theory, I suppose, if things go perfectly well for him. He probably did that once or twice in his life. And he played hurt last year, for the record. Like, they kind of came out in the offseason that this is why he wasn't particularly great in some games. Jump in here, Grant. Who are you prioritizing in the upper mid-tier as far as running backs?
Upper mid-tier? I don't know exactly what you classify as upper mid-tier.
Like Jacobs, Kamara, the guys I just said.
Jacob, yeah. Well, the upper mid-tier can mean a lot of things. But like Jacobs, Kamara, Cook, I don't have a strong take on any of them. Like, I have a lot more stronger take on the middle tier. I think that Gurley is a fantastic play today. The more I look into it, the more I think about it. We saw what Freeman did in this offense for years. Like, is Freeman any better than Gurley? Well, Gurley has a contract right now and Freeman doesn't, so that says something. But Gurley is a guy that has a nose for the end zone. Like, we saw how many touchdowns he got over with the Rams. Yes, his knees are probably dust. Yes, I worry about his workload, but we're looking at GPPs. He's coming in at 8% ownership in all likelihood. I think that he's a fantastic play. And then Drake is a guy that I've more and more thought about, and I know that there's a little bit of worry that game is being canceled. I know that there's all sorts of weather problems there. I know he's going up against a tough defense. I know that San Francisco likes to run the ball, but what he did in the second half of the season, specifically towards the end of last season, is very different than what a lot of the guys that are in his price range are at. I mean, we've seen him put up massive games. We've seen him put up a huge workload. We know that offense can get running at certain times. So I like him quite a bit on this slate. Other guys that I think you can potentially use, Singletary. I know that a lot of people are worried about Moss, but Singletary was the guy last year. Again, short and off season. He's coming at low ownership. Aaron Jones is a guy that's not going to garner much ownership, but he can have that massive game at any given time. We don't know what the game script's going to be. So he's a guy that could put up a big game. And then Chris Thompson. We talked about Gibson being moderately chalky and Scott being chalky. Thompson's in an offense where they only have, two guys that they're probably going to be using in it. Jacksonville, if you watch the games last year, anytime that they got down big, last drive, they were dumping the ball off to Fournette again and again. We've seen teams do that with Chris Thompson before in the past. Saw it over in Washington. He's a guy that hasn't really had a huge role very often in the last few years, and he's definitely been just a third down back or a pass play back. But he has the potential to get 10-plus receptions in this one. We don't know if they're going to split him out wide. We don't know exactly what they're going to do with him in this offense, but he's priced at 4K, just bottom barrel pricing on a full-point PPR site, coming in at less than 10% ownership, massive upside. We don't know if he's going to get a touchdown, but if he does, he has a chance at over 20 points in this spot here. I really, really like Thompson today.
Yeah, I think he's pretty interesting too. 4K on DK especially, and like you say, they're probably going to be down, and he's probably going to catch a bunch of dump off passes. They have James Robinson as well too, the undrafted free agent running back, and of course we know they got rid of Fournette. Dare is still there, so there is 3 running backs in the mix in theory. But yeah, not a high team total obviously for the Jacksonville side, but game strips suggests that Thompson will benefit from the fact that, well, the presumption that they will be down. Beer, I'm pretty sure we're going to run your 6-pack between shows, as we said for the next show. I'm not really certain. Devin's all over that. That'll run at some point, or it's run out. You guys can find it on the RG feed. Hey, like and subscribe. Hit that like button, chat. What's up, chat? We see your questions. We'll do our best to answer as many as we can. No promises, though. Mixon, wasn't Mixon your beast of the week? Is that true, or can you confirm that, or did I not recall that correctly?
Absolutely true, Dean. So we'll give it away here. I love Joe Mixon here, and I get it. The Chargers are good defense. A lot of questions with the Cincinnati team. They're underdogs, generally not where I want my running backs, but I think this is a great spot. The Chargers actually struggled against the run last season, and you lose Derwin James off the defense. I do think he's going to be heavily involved in the passing game. You pay this guy almost $50 million. We got to throw him some passes here. So I just see a game where nobody's really going to want to take him, and the upside, it's basically a workhorse at a discounted price. I mean, he could put up as big of a game as anybody. Nobody's on him. The price is way too cheap. So add it all together, Dean, and I like this offense today, but more so I really like the spot for Mixon.
Yeah, Beer, Grant mentioned Gurley, and he talked about his knees being dust. He's 26, but he seems a lot older than that. But I don't care. It's opportunity, right? Opportunity for me trumps everything, and the whole running backs don't matter. They're all good to some various degrees. But it's opportunity. Opportunity is king, and they probably want to justify trading for him. Or if they trade for him as a free agent, I don't recall. It doesn't matter. He's in the team. That's we saw it with David Johnson as well, too, on Thursday night. But yeah, and if he's not going to be owned, I think he was the Ian Hartz helicopter play as well, too. Ian Hartz always does a PFF show with Britt Devine. You guys should check that out. That was out earlier this week. That'll be out next week, too. Good times. Your thoughts as far as Gurley, thoughts as far as other guys that Grant threw out there, and feel free to add a new name to the mix.
Yeah, I like Gurley. I mean, how do you not? The price is there. The game flow should be good. I mean, he's can be involved in the passing game. The touchdown upside's there. We don't have to worry about his health in week 1. I mean, if it's week 10, 11, now we start thinking about how those knees holding up. But looks explosive in camp, and I know some of those reports can be BS, but the matchups there, Seattle was not good against the run. Another team we can target against. They lose Clowney. That certainly doesn't help. So I do like the matchup there. I think that's one of those plays that no one's really going to be on. The upside is definitely huge. And same for Dalvin Cook. You brought him up, Dean. That's the one that has me scratching my head as far as ownership goes. So I'm hammering Dalvin Cook everywhere. Green Bay was terrible against the run, and he only played them once. It was early on last season, but went over 30 DraftKings points in that game. He got paid. We can put all those questions to bed. I love this spot for Dalvin Cook. So Mixon, Cook, Jacobs. I think if you didn't want to play McCaffrey, this is the reason why. You have plenty of guys in that territory. I agree on the Thompson take, a guy that could catch a bunch of passes and get you there alone on DraftKings, just catching balls. Robinson is also minimum price. So mixing those guys in, and mainly to get you away from Boston Scott, I think those are the guys you want to go to. Save you a little bit of money, save you a lot of ownership. And with them playing from behind, you also got to look at the other side. And I'm a big Jonathan Taylor guy, but Marlon Mack sounds like he's still the guy there. So this is more of a FanDuel play and looking for those touchdowns. But I don't see 2 touchdowns being out of the question here for Marlon Mack in this game against Jacksonville. So
what's the split going to be there? What do you project the split? Of course, Hines is still kind of lurking more of the third down guy, but game script suggests that Indianapolis will be running this game out. And who's running the clock out? Is it Mack? Is it Taylor, or just a combination platter?
I think they're both going to get plenty of work here. I still think it'll be split in Mack's favor. I think eventually that changes as we go along the season here, but I think there's enough for both of these guys. And do I want to play them both? I prefer Mack this week. I think eventually we'll get to play Jonathan Taylor, but I would say a 65-35, 70-30 in favor of Mack, something like that. Hines, don't have a ton of interest in. Kind of want to see what his role is going to be. Obviously, DraftKings is where you'd want to play him, but I think that's going a little too far. I'd rather play the Jacksonville guys if you're looking at Nyheim Hines.
I like that Taylor price on FanDuel. I think he's 5'4" over there. And who knows? I agree. And it probably is going to shift more to Taylor, as the season progresses. We shall see. Stay tuned on that. But hey, it's DFS. All we care about is today. Got to talk some receivers. Grant, open it up for us. How much are you prioritizing Michael Thomas? And again, he's much more difficult to get. I'm not sure if you've heard this yet in the show. Much more difficult to get on DK than he is on FanDuel. As far as DK, dollar for dollar, as far as the big spends, I think Devontae Adams looks like an awesome play over there. Significant discount off of a guy like Michael Thomas. Would love to get as much Michael Thomas as possible. But again, if you go over the salary, DK will refuse to accept your lineup. What are you doing with the big spends over there, Grant?
I mean, I really like Adams' price tag. He's going up against Minnesota. He can put up a big game on every single week. He's going to get peppered with targets. He's not going to be as high owned as he probably should be. I mean, this is a guy that didn't have less than 20 points the last 5 games of the season. He had less than 20 points only 4 times, I think, all last season. He is an absolute beast. He's going to get 10-plus targets. It's pretty much a guarantee here. And he's priced at just 7.3K. I know that Thomas is great. I know that he's in New Orleans and playing in a dome, but so is Adams. And Thomas is $1,700 more expensive. Tampa Bay, yes, they had a bad pass defense last year, and the game script was entirely different because Winston was there and they were constantly turning the ball over. But Emmanuel Sanders has been added to that offense. I think that he eats into his target share a decent amount. So up at the top, like, Adams is my favorite guy probably. I think that he's going to crush here. I think that he's in for a high floor, high ceiling game. And outside of that, like Julio Jones, 11-12% ownership. Julio Jones, we don't know when he's ever going to go off, so I'm basically playing him game script dependent. Godwin, Evans wasn't going to play, then he was going to play, and now I still can't even remember if he's going to play. It's confusing. Everyone assumes Godwin's going to crush, but Tom Brady, there's no guarantee that he's going to put up big numbers. He's still well past his prime. I don't know how good he's actually going to be this year. He just has a lot of weapons around him. He can go Gronk, he can go O.J. Howard, he can go Ronald Jones. He can go any number of different guys and get it there, and they only have a 22 implied team total, which really isn't that high, especially over in New Orleans. So Godwin is fine. If Evans gets ruled out, it definitely gives him an uptick. I still think that you can fade him in tournaments pretty easily because this offense is going to be very different with Brady involved. But like up at the top, Adams is my guy.
Beer, are you with that as far as dollar for dollar? Adams is the better play over a guy like Michael Thomas. Again, we love Michael Thomas. I assume you do too. But I don't know how much of him I can get. And Godwin's pretty interesting if Evans is out there just kind of a distraction kind of play. He's just sort of running routes and exercising, as Rebar would say. I don't know what to do with him. I think Godwin's much more of a better play than Evans, but the ownership's going to reflect that as well, too. And then, hey, when we work in the mid-tier, you got to love Marvin Jones in the dome, presumably being the number one receiver now with the injury over there to Holiday. Thielen, very, very solid price on FanDuel, solid price on DK as well, too, as I kind of work my way down. And then it opens up the conversation, Beer, as far as some receivers where traditionally they aren't like cash game receivers, but just the way pricing works. Marquise Hollywood Brown is super interesting to me. And even, Djax, Deshaun Jackson, revenge game, always good in week 1 if you want to play those narratives. He's super cheap as well, too. And those are the guys that just need one play to justify the roster spot. Talk to me about all those dudes I just named. They're just got to pick a couple. Well, what kind of pop for you?
A lot of great names at wide receiver this week, Dean. Some guys that are too cheap, some guys like Djax that play well in week 1, play well against Washington. The return of Jalen Reagor, it puts a little bit of a crimp in Deshaun Jackson, but I still like him there. But there's a ton of options here, and I agree with Grant. I think if you're spending up, it's Adams. I just can't justify the $1,700 difference to go to Thomas. As good as he is, no doubt he's going to get there, but is he going to drastically outscore Michael Thomas here, where you're wondering, why didn't I pay that extra $1,700, which you can use elsewhere? I don't think so. Minnesota's secondary, absolute trash. The corners are garbage. He's going to see a ton of balls here. So as bad as Rodgers plays in Minnesota, like I brought up with the quarterbacks, Adams can still get there without Rodgers doing much. So I like him. Thielen's another guy you play on the other side of that game, who kind of the same scenario. Who else are they throwing the ball to? I mean, it seems like Irv Smith is their second option there in the passing game. So Thielen, when healthy, we know can be a top 5 receiver in the league, but a ton of different names. That the Seattle guys are interesting to me, Lockett and DK Metcalf against that secondary. The other side, Julio and Ridley both in play. You mentioned Marvin Jones. I think he's a solid play. In fact, I think he's a great cash game play today. Should see some ownership in tournaments. Easy to get away with that with some of the pivots available, but cash games, I'd lock him in for sure. And the Bears guys, I like the other side of that game as well. Allen Robinson and Anthony Miller. Miller's always played well against Detroit, as has Trubisky. So that could be a stack right there, or even use all three of them. It's an easy target tree to kind of predict to stack that team up. So a million ways that you can go here, Dean. A lot of ways you can stack. We didn't even mention Terry McLaurin.
Yeah.
I mean, you can go on and on at the receiver position this week.
Your thoughts as far as playing, historically high variance players like Djax and Hollywood Brown in cash games. Like typically in years past, I would shy away from that, but now I kind of sort of embrace that variance to some degree. That's the guy that can save me. Like if he gets me, get the top end of it. And I also throw my cash games in tournaments sometimes too, and I tinker like a 1v1 or something like that sometimes. But I've changed my opinion on that over the years, and I'm willing to embrace the high variance sometimes for cash games. Thoughts for you?
Yeah, same. It used to be you never play guys like this. You know, the variance is too high, the risk is too high. I still want to be a little risky in my cash games too. Everything can't be floor. You're not going to win over the long run just playing floor plays. And you generally have floor plays in your lineup. You're going McCaffrey. You got a floor there with a ceiling. You can take some more risks with guys like this. So when they're in a smash spot like this, I have no issues playing them in cash games. Tournaments, it's usually a matter of ownership, and they've kind of ticked down a little bit. I think it's just there's so many receivers you can play that no one's going to be overly owned here today. You know, there's some guys in the mid 20s, but to me, I don't worry as much about mid 20s ownership. It's when it's 30, 35 on a guy like Jackson or Brown, I'm shying away from that. But with everything moving down, Metcalf was a guy that was going to be highly owned early in the week. That's trending down. There's just so many choices for people. Ton of different stacks you can make today.
Give me your favorite receiver on DK that's like 4-5 and under.
4-5 and under. I like Preston Williams. I think he's right at that 4-5 spot. And I love the Cam Newton, Preston Williams kind of correlation where I don't need to stack anybody with Cam. I run it back on the other side with Williams. Parker, we're likely going to see the heavy coverage there with Gilmore. And Preston Williams was impressive when he was on the field last year. So I know Grant's expecting a Miami win. I do think they're going to be competitive in this game. I'll say that. I don't know if they pull off the win, but I do think this offense can do some things. And Preston Williams, way too cheap, in my opinion.
All right, Grant, you can't use Preston Williams. Same question for you. And I also have this question from chat. Grant, is AJ Green still sick nasty?
I don't know.
I'm
I'm struggling since Beer took my guy.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Give me somebody else.
Chris Conley.
Oh boy, try again.
Yeah,
Dean gave you the hammer on that one. Try again.
Chris Conley.
The judges are saying no. Yeah, they're putting the X up.
They're going to be throwing. Chris Conley had some decent games last year. I don't even know how involved
Grant,
in the offense.
I know. Grant, you
Help
mentioned these guys earlier, and there might not be 4,500, but one of them is the Vegas receivers are squarely in play here.
Yeah.
You know, Ruggs and Bryan Edwards are both super cheap across both sites here. And again, that Carolina defense, not only bad against the run, they're not very good against the pass either. Bradbury's moved on. So those guys are going to be thrust into starting roles. They're going to have to play right away. So both those guys, I think, are great values today.
Hey, Beer, if Ruggs gets me everything I want on FanDuel, can I play him at cash at 5-1?
I don't see why not. I mean, it's a little risky, like we talked about. He's kind of in that same vein of guys we've traditionally stayed away from. But if he's going to open things up and you got studs at every other spot, and he's your one risky spot against Carolina, why not? I mean,
I'm told their defense is terrible. I'm told their secondary is terrible. And I'm told Ruggs is really, really fast. And if I'm not mistaken, I'm not a college ball guy. I think he was the first receiver taken in the draft.
Correct.
Yeah, and he's also one of those guys, just one play, and why not show off the new shiny toy? All right, let's pivot to tight ends. Grant, open up tight ends for us.
Tight ends. Well, let's talk about the Dolphins. Gesicki, boom, lots of points. But Herndon is too cheap at 3.3K. Like, he makes a lot of things work in cash over on DK. He's a guy that I'm probably going to end up using in cash. Don't know how this game's going to go, but Jets are likely going to have to be passing it later on. He should be heavily involved in that offense. Without Galladay, Hawkinson is definitely a tight end you should be using. I know that we saw that massive week one out of him, and then things kind of changed after that. But Stafford was out for a large portion of this season. He played all the way up in Kansas City. Hawkinson had two 10-point games during that time frame. He was getting a decent amount of targets. He absolutely has some upside, and they're going to have to throw the ball somewhere without Galladay in that offense. So Hawkinson's a guy that I think you can use. Kittle, if you're paying up, go ahead. Hurst, game of the week right there. 4.3K. We saw how much Hooper was used in that offense. last season. We could see something similar this season. We could see a lot of passes being thrown. If you want to go off the board, then O.J. Howard is a fantastic play.
Oh, boy, here it is. I've heard this story before.
Yeah, and how did it work out every single time? Terribly. I know.
Mostly terrible.
I don't care. This is a different QB in the offense. This is a different spot here, and it went terrible all last year, people will say, but last few weeks of the season, like we look at week 16 through week 13, and 6 targets, 5 targets, 8 targets, 7 targets. He was getting a lot of work, and now he has a quarterback that likes to throw the tight end. Gronk, everyone's going to go with, but we don't know how entrenching that offense is going to be. We know that there's a decent chance he's used a lot for blocking. I wouldn't be surprised if they bring O.J. Howard outside. If Mike Evans isn't playing, he could be a lot more involved as a pass catcher. They used to bring him outside fairly often. I can't remember the stats from last year, but he is a guy that they can definitely bring out wide. He's a guy that can absolutely catch, and he was a lot more in the offense towards the end of the season. I could see that again this year. Remember, Brady likes to use 2 tight end sets. I know Arians doesn't, but Brady is kind of the guy that they're going to build the offense around. I really like O.J. Howard today, and then Andrews is fine. Ertz is fine. Goddard, I think, is a decent tournament play at low ownership because everyone's going to be on Ertz. But yeah, I guess I'm just really liking them backup tight ends.
All right, Beer, we still have a couple more minutes here, so we got to make this quick. But Herndon on DK specifically is interesting just because of the price. The matchup is terrible, but he should see at least 5 targets or so. And he should get like 5 for 30. Maybe he falls in the end zone. Of course, not a lot of touch and equity on a team that has a team total that's so low. I like Andrews a good bit, getting rid of Hurst, clearing him out of there, giving him a little more opportunity. Hockenson looks pretty interesting. I don't know about playing 2 Detroit receivers in cash, but, if you play Jones as well, too, I think you can. I'm not sure if I want to. Maybe we're in our bubble, but I don't think people are going to play Gronk. Maybe outside of the whole DFS world or new players, sure. Doyle's pretty interesting on DK because he's super cheap at 3.6K. And Kittle, if I have all the money in the world, Kittle should absolutely smash. Much easier. I'm not sure if you've heard this yet, Pierre. Much easier to get Kittle on FanDuel than he is on DK.
Really? That's shocking to me, Dean.
Yeah, I hope you're sitting down. You can play him on Yahoo as well, too. And I like Andrews on Yahoo a good bit, and Hawkins is only $12 over there. Give me your summary on tight ends in like a minute or less.
I'll keep it really quick here, Dean. That's pretty much my player pool is Kittle if I'm spending up, Hockenson and Hurst if I'm going cheaper, and then a punt play for me as Logan Thomas. I like that game. We're hearing rave reviews out of this guy. He's kind of the pivot for me off of Herndon. I love Chris Herndon. I absolutely hate this matchup. So I get the prices there. I'd rather say 500. You're going sub 3K here with Logan Thomas at 2,800. And he could bagel, no doubt. That's kind of the risk with a $2,800 tight end. But lack of weaponry there, I think they're going to get this guy involved. So that's pretty much the tight end pool for me. I am playing some Darren Waller as well, very low owned. I keep mentioning that game. I'm stacking that game a ton of different ways. Nobody's going to be on it. And I think Waller, with those rookies there, we like them. But Waller's basically their number 1 receiver. So I know there's concerns. Is the targets going to be there for Darren Waller again this season? I think plenty of targets will be there for him today. So he's kind of the off-the-radar play along with Dallas Goedert.
Up against the clock. You got to be concise here, Grant. Again, coming up after us is Toe Tag and Tambo along with Notorious. And we're going all the way up the lock for free. 2 more shows after us. Give me 30 seconds on defenses.
Who cares? Just play the Jets or the Chargers.
Okay. High variance position, obviously. Colts, I saw somebody in chat talking about it. Of course, the Colts are interesting in a good spot, and the weather is cooperating, which can, could give us some wonkiness as opposed. Also, the offense they're playing against is pretty terrible too. What do you have for me as far as defenses here, Beer?
Pretty much with Grant, who just mix in some defenses. If I'm spending, it's Philadelphia and it's Indianapolis, but I like going cheap here with the Jets and even the Washington football team, Dean. Minimum price here. I don't mind throwing a 2K there and spending the money elsewhere.
Yeah, the Philadelphia has some offensive line issues. We're seeing some continuity issues there as well there too. All right, we got to step aside and get out of here. Before we do that, I need a stack. And somebody that's going to be in the winning millionaire maker lineups, however you want to do it. Grant, you go first. You set the bar.
Fitzpatrick Dolphins.
Yeah, well, you can't stack them the entire Dolphins. Who are you stacking them with?
Parker, Preston Williams, Gesicki.
Okay, all 3 of them. All right.
Yeah, mix and match. Play 2 of them. 2 of them are going to go off.
All right. Well, what do you have for me, Beer?
I'm going Jimmy Garoppolo, Kendrick Bourne, George Kittle, running it back with Kendrick Drake as the winning lineup today.
We got to go. We got to step aside again. Show coming up right after us. I believe Beer Makers fans pick six is going to come up in between the two of us. It'll be good times for sure. If you guys, you can get all of us picks. We gave up Mixon. You can hear the rest. That'll be good times for sure. Enjoy your football today. Thanks everybody for watching. Feel free to like and subscribe. Do appreciate that. Smash, caress, whatever you want to do. The like button, just make it happen. Get the thumb up there. He was Beer. He was Grant. I was Dean. This was football. We're out of here. Holler.
Hit the thumb.
We're back in the fantasy bar for the first time ever, talking DraftKings Best Ball. 6 of my favorite quarterbacks. Going to give you a guy at every price range, including my favorite value quarterback, what guys in the mid-range are underpriced, and what quarterback not named Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson I think can win MVP this season. Who are we talking about? Belly up to the fantasy bar and find out. Welcome in, guys. Special edition here, Beers Daily Fantasy 6-pack, talking NFL football, talking best ball on DraftKings for the first time ever. We are going to break down the positions for best ball. We'll start this week with the quarterback position, 6 of my favorite quarterbacks over there on DraftKings. Make sure you get over to DK and check out all the best ball offerings, including that big $3 million tournament, just a $25 buy-in for that tournament. And you guys are looking for premium content, make sure you head over to Rotogrinders. We're back at the fantasy bar. 6 of my favorite wide receiver best ball plays over on DraftKings, including a trio of wide receivers being drafted after a higher drafted teammate, my favorite value wide receiver, and what wide receiver I think can finish in the top 5 that only costs you a top 20 wide receiver pick. Who is it? Belly up to the fantasy bar and find out. Welcome in, guys. Special DraftKings Best Ball edition here, continuing our series position by position. This video, we will look at the wide receiver position, a very deep position in fantasy this season, a ton of options, but I've narrowed things down to 6 of the guys I've been drafting the most at all different price points here, including a beast that will surprise you, a guy I think that has top 5 upside, and you don't have to take him inside the top 20 at the position. So we'll get to that at the end of the video. Stay tuned for that. Before we get into the plays, guys, special offer for you just for hanging out here at the fantasy bar. Head over to rotogrinders.com/beer for $10 off a Core 4 premium subscription. And what does that mean? We're not only giving you one sport, we're giving you 4 sports under one umbrella with the best premium content out there. You get NFL football right around the corner. You get MLB, NBA, as well as PGA Tour golf. And what a better place than Rotogrinders to get your premium information from. Our revolutionary line.
What's up, everyone? Tyler Tamboline here, aka Toe Tag and Tambo, and it's week 1. We're here. We finally made it. So, gonna go into some stuff. I appreciate y'all being here. This is gonna be an awesome show. Got myself, Notorious. Bring him in a second. We're gonna go through looking at everything on the slate as it pertains to week 1. Talk a little bit of cash game structure, MME builds, lineup HQ, rules, settings, pretty much everything you can use with the tools that we provide. Producer Devin's gonna drop a link throughout in the chat that you guys can go on and sign up, get a discount there. Get all the same tools that we're using. But let's bring in my man, Mr. Derek Farnsworth. Most of you know him as Notorious. Noto, what's happening, my man?
Oh, man, pumped for week 1. All the sports going on right now. Can't ask for a better time to be a sports fan. So I'm excited. A lot of news over the last couple of days that kind of changed the slate a little bit. So we'll cover all that. And, yeah, excited to hear your take on some of the player pool.
Yeah, the news is still flying in. Actually, I just saw some news now about Tevin Coleman. He has the sickle cell trait. The air control quality, whatever that you want to call it, there is not the greatest. So looks like the game's still going to be okay. But talking about if he's out, I mean that would bring Raheem Mostert into the mix, and we've already got some other value running backs that we're going to talk about here today. We usually do some golf stuff. It also happens to be week 1 of golf. It's like you said, a lot of sports going on at one time, but we're here to talk football. I think what we'll do quickly is just go over a quick overview, like you say, some of the player pool. I do want to get to build rules, group stacks, some of that stuff near the end. And then I think that we're going to look a little bit too at wrapping this up in about an hour, just so everyone still has time. And then we have another show coming up after this, crunch time, leading you guys right up till lock. So let's start with the refresh here. We're going to get the ownership projection update. Make sure we've got the latest and greatest. I've got the tool for you, for those of you that just tuned in for the first time. Lineup HQ, best optimizer out there. It's got all the ability that you'd want when it comes to building tournaments, all the different settings you can see. And then if you click this box out here, you can even do a lineup preview if you are doing something like single entry or 3-max. And note, I'm going to pick your brain on that in a second. This is a great tool that I like to use just to sort of play around and mix and match it going back and forth. So we'll hide the sidebar for now. Talk to me about quarterback for a second. I know you do a lot in golf when it comes to high dollar, single entry, that sort of stuff. What's sort of your philosophy when it comes to football for starters? And then where are you at with the quarterback position as it pertains to that?
Yeah, so I generally make one main lineup similar to golf, and then I usually sprinkle in 4 or 5 tournament lineups. I've never had a ton of success making, 150 lineups. Perhaps I need to get better at the build rules here with Lineup HQ. So I'm excited to do this show and learn some stuff from you. But as far as the quarterback goes, it's most important to build correlation into your lineups. The easiest way to do that is at the quarterback position, pairing him up with 1 or 2 of his wideouts. You can bring it back with someone from the other side. And I think that's just the easiest way to build a stack. Stacking has become a lot more popular over the last few years, but it's still not used enough in tournaments, especially large field tournaments. So that's what I would look to do.
Okay, yeah. So for me, like it's the same sort of thing what you just talked about as far as stacking goes. I think, like you said, you got to get outside your comfort zone. Not particularly you. You mentioned like wanting to look at it and do better, but I think it's just in everybody's case. It's they stack Lamar Jackson, Marquise Brown, and say, "There, I've got my stack. Now, who do I go to next?" Or even in the beginning, right now, you see a lot of people going, Lamar, Marquise Brown, Andrews, and I'm wearing the Ravens gear. Obviously, a big Ravens fan. Lamar jersey on. I'm excited about today, but I do have a little bit of a worry when it comes to that, just for the price. Now, listen, let me explain, because I talked about this earlier in the week a little bit on a couple of the other shows that I did. I'm underweight on the Lamar Baltimore stack for GPPs. He's still looking like he's going to be the highest owned quarterback overall. With all of the running back value, and we're going to get there shortly with Boston Scott, Antonio Gibson, all these guys that have opened it up, I think if you just have, a strong single entry, and the guy that I do like to play naked is a guy like Lamar who can take those goal lines. He's basically a quarterback and a running back for 8.1K. You got to look at it that way. I will use him in those spots, but I'm not really as excited about him, Marquise Brown, and Andrews just to have the same stack that not everyone, I mean, it's not the most popular stack, but it just shows when you've got him as the, more popular quarterback. We'll get to wide receiver with Marquise Brown. So where are you at with Lamar Jackson at the top? And then we'll talk about some of the other value plays or guys that you like for tournaments.
Yeah, I mean, Lamar's a unique case because you mentioned it, his rushing upside. You just got to think about things in terms of what has to happen for a guy to have a big game. And Lamar could go out and run for 120 yards, get a couple touchdowns, and it doesn't mean that his receivers have to go off with him. Somebody like Matt Ryan, if he's going to have a huge game, if he's going to have a slate-breaking performance, it's going to be through the air and it's going to be through his pass catchers. So I agree on Lamar. I don't think you have to stack him up. I would probably stack him with one or the other, Marquise Brown or Mark Andrews, especially if you're looking to bring it back on the other side. But if you're playing single entry or cash games, I don't mind using naked Lamar. He's the one quarterback that I would look to kind of employ that approach. That way you don't have to worry about, choosing who you're going to stack him with. Such a good matchup too. And he could obviously get it done on the ground. So I'm much higher on Lamar than the 13% ownership that we have right now, but he is expensive. You kind of have to choose there's three guys at the top. You got Lamar, McCaffrey, and Michael Thomas, and you can't play all three. So how would you rank those three? Not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but in terms of lineup priority, do you have a preference between those three?
Yeah, for me, it's CMC at the top. Like I said, we'll definitely get there. But the idea is that, a lot of people talk about this stuff, and I like to bring it up, is, where do you need the value and where can you make it work? Now, we have enough running back value to make a guy like Michael Thomas work. But at the same time, when we get to wide receiver, there's just so many guys there in that 5K range, 4K range. There's even guys coming into play now, like if Mike Evans was out, Justin Watson, Scotty Miller, you've got Galladay, all these situations where we're at right now, there's a lot of possible value. Marv Jones, other guys like Cephas or Cephas is going to be another guy they've talked a lot about in camp. There's just different wide receivers. There's so many of them that you can bring in. I think I saw last year's Millie Maker winner had Marquise Brown and Terry McLaurin, which were much more unknown names at that time. And I think they were like 3,400 and 3,800 in week one, and both got over 25 fantasy points. There's going to be so many opportunities, and wide receiver is so volatile that I just don't know. Could Michael Thomas break the slate? Absolutely, he could. You could get some stuff going with him, use him instead of a guy, but I still kind of like Kamara, and we'll get there too. So it's good for me. It would be CMC, Lamar, and then Michael Thomas, but I understand the case for it all. I know Derek Carty and the Blitz will tell you it's Michael Thomas, gap, and then maybe CMC and then Lamar. But, it's different for everybody. And in these large field tournaments, even though he's going to be a little bit under-owned, I only really like using Michael Thomas in a secondary stack. And we'll talk about some of those too. That's sort of another way I get unique in these GPPs is I like to make sure, even if I have a normal stack, like we'll talk about your boy Russell Wilson here in a second. I think you like some Seattle, Atlanta stuff this week, right?
Yeah, certainly don't mind it. You want to get into it right now?
Yeah, maybe talk about that for a second. I'll just talk about what I was going to say afterwards. But yeah, what is your thoughts on the Seattle Atlanta game? Because I think it's primed to go off, right? It looks like it's going to be a spot that there's a lot of good plays across the board and ways you could stack it up. What are you doing with Wilson, and who do you like bringing along with him?
Yeah, so I like Wilson in tournaments, especially large field tournaments. The thing is, the game script has to go his way for him to really, break off a big game. When they get ahead, they're just going to pound the rock. We've seen that year in, year out. We all want Russ to be Russ and for him to air it out, but that just never is the case unless they get down big. So the best case scenario for this game is for the Falcons to get out to a lead, and then Russ is going to do Russ things. He's going to have a big game. It's easy to pair him up with his pass catchers and Lockett and Metcalf because, it's a very tight distribution there in terms of the target share. And then obviously you got a lot of good plays on the Atlanta side as well. The only concern for me is if Seattle gets out to a big lead, they start milking the clock, and then Russ doesn't do anything, and then they dominate time and possession. So that's the concern there, and that's why I wouldn't look there in cash games or maybe even some smaller field stuff. But I do like it in large field GPPs.
Yeah, and I think you said a good point. I'm sort of the same bias when it comes to that. In order for Russ to do things, I think we need to see Atlanta go off. So when I'm building those lineups, I'm looking to stack them up with Russ, Metcalf, and Lockett, and then you want to have a guy the other way, whether it's Gurley, like you said, maybe Gurley gets the scoring going at the start that brings that game into a shootout. I like using it as that versus, like you said, if it is that run heavy game where it's, Carson and Gurley banging either side, just trying going back and forth, you're not going to get a lot out of it. And in that case, if you have more than one build, that's hopefully you can, where you can, get unique with it and be able to build it up that way. So you can build for two different game flows or game scripts. And that's what I was going to say at the top, is using it as a secondary stack. Like I like Michael Thomas for New Orleans, you can use him with a guy from Tampa Bay, whether it's Chris Godwin, or if you want to go down, if Evans is out, and use a guy like Justin Watson, you can have a cheap mini stack there, still get some exposure to that game, but not have to risk, the Tom Brady's, the Drew Breeses, all the extra stack stuff of the world that you're not sure of, and just still get some exposure to that game. Similar to this game, if you don't see it happening that way, I've got no problem with a, Ridley and Carson for a different type of game flow, right? That can still get there without this game being a massive shootout where you get Carson scoring a couple touchdowns, them wanting to run the clock, but then Matt Ryan getting it going with Ridley the other way. So not going to talk about every quarterback. We're obviously doing an overview and things that we like. Talk to me maybe about one or two more guys that you like down here, and then I'll give you, my thoughts on a couple of mine to spin with it.
Yeah, so it feels awfully fishy, but I like Mitch Trubisky going up against the Lions. It looks like his ownership is trending upward later in the week as well. But, he won the quarterback competition against Nick Foles. He has a really good track record against the Lions. It's indoors. And, we saw the rushing upside tick up toward the end of last year when he was at his best, when he was featured in all those Millie Maker lineups. He was running the ball quite a bit. And to finish last season, he had 63, 29, and 20 rushing yards in 3 of his last 4 games. He's cheap. You can pair him up with Allen Robinson, bring it back with some of the guys on the other side, especially now that Galladay not expected to play. So I don't know. I hope you like him as well, because I can't seem to. I think he might be my single entry quarterback, which is a little scary.
Yeah, I do like him, and I've got some stacks with him. Like I said, we'll talk about wide receivers, but I like who you said, Allen Robinson for sure, but I also like Anthony Miller. Yeah. I think you can go there. I think, like you said, the intrigue is the cost, and we'll talk about this some as the year goes on in these shows, but you've got, the cost of the total stack matters, right? Like we said, is Lamar, Marquise Brown, and Andrews a great stack? Probably, but how much more expensive is it to get to that than it is to get to Trubisky, Miller, Robinson, and then bring it back with a guy like Hawkinson or Marv Hall, Marv Jones? There's all these options for Detroit on the other side. You can keep it cheap and then start jamming in all these running backs, which we'll segue to here shortly. So I'm with you on Trubisky. Maybe I'll hear your thoughts on my guy. I got a couple. I do like Wentz. Well, I won't go too into on that because again, just looking at stacking options, I think we know Deshaun's going to be popular. We know Boston Scott's going to be popular. Ertz, Goddard. There's just so many guys on that side that you can use with them. And then the same on Washington, right? You've got McLaurin, you've got Gibson, you've got other guys that you can use to bring back. And again, a cheap stack. But my weird or off the table one, I think, looking at 1.5% ownership here, maybe I'm doing something extremely wrong, but I kind of like Gardner Minshew, right? I like this stack. They don't have Fournette obviously anymore. I see that. I see that, man. But it's not because of that. I'll tell you, it's, I like Chark quite a bit this week. I like actually Eifert as a weird tight end play at 3,300. Yeah. It's another guy that's super, just for 3,300, he doesn't have to do much, but he actually does have the upside to score a TD or two in this game. And I think with Indy just pounding the rock, you've got Jonathan Taylor, you've got Marlon Mack, you've got guys on that side, Hilton, who we're going to talk about. I mean, there's some interesting plays over there. And then they've got, Paris Campbell, Pittman, some new guys, some new blood there. So I think Minshew's a play. What's your thoughts on that though?
Yeah, I like him. I wish he was a little bit cheaper. 58 on DraftKings seems a little expensive. I would prefer Trubisky, but the Jaguars going to be playing from behind pretty much all year. He brings that rushing upside. They're going to be trailing, which is always good for a quarterback, especially a cheap quarterback. And you mentioned it, pretty easy to stack him up with his wideouts. And third thing is their running game. We don't know what it's going to be with Robinson back there. If Chris Thompson gets more work, he's obviously not going to handle a bunch of carries. So that's actually a bonus for Minshew. So I like it. And then with Wentz, if they can keep him upright, I do think he's going to have a big game. Washington's biggest weakness is their secondary. They do have a very good front seven. And Eagles are without 2 of their offensive linemen, which does worry me a little bit. Both of them are out for the season. Does look like Lane Johnson's going to suit up, which is a boost. But yeah, I don't know. I kind of like Washington as a cheap defense if the offensive line doesn't hold up for Philly. But like you mentioned, everyone's going to be on Boston Scott. So that nice leverage, if all the touchdowns come through the passing game, then I do think Wentz could easily pay off in tournaments. Yeah,
we'll talk about Washington D. That's sort of the hedge life that you got to live over there on the other side on my non-Wentz lineups. I don't mind that at all. The O-line is what worries me for Philly, but like I said, at his price, 6'3", floor, ceiling, ability, what's around him, that's the only reason I have interest. Last guy, and we'll move on to running back because there's more to talk about there, but Cam Newton, what's your thoughts on him? Because, 6.1K, new team, great coach, good squad, lots of opportunity, but, what's the thoughts on him at 6.1K versus a guy like Lamar at 8.1K? Newton's another guy that, if he gets those legs going or if they let him have any freedom whatsoever, he can do some damage as well. And he costs quite a bit less than a guy like Lamar up at the top.
Yeah, he's the top 5 quarterback play for me this week. I'd rather be early than late when it comes to Cam. Lane Johnson's out, apparently. I was thinking it said he was going to play. Anyway, so that would hurt Wentz a little bit more too.
It does, yeah.
Anyway, as far as Cam, I like him. I would rather be early than late. Like I said, I do think he's going to rush a little bit more. New England has a long history of getting the most out of their guys, even if, whatever talent level they have, they're going to get the most out of them. So I think he's going to have a big year, and I think it's a great matchup to start week 1.
Yeah, I'm with you the same there. I like it. Sneaky stack. I talked about this on the Tournament Take show that I did this week. It's a podcast we'll do every week, myself, Killa B, and Kirk Dees. And I was talking about it. Remember Demir Bird with Cam Newton in Carolina? That's a super cheap piece that you can stack with him in New England. I think that would be an interesting play to match him up with. And then what's the guy's name? I think it's Devin Asai or Asisi. I forget how to pronounce his last name, but he's the tight end for New England. That there's been a lot of talk out of camp with him, and New England loves their tight ends. So that's just a cheap stack you could put together over there. That's an interesting one to say the least. So I've got a few of those. Let's move on to running back. I want to talk a little bit more at the top here about the obvious. So two things. We've got Scott and Gibson. We know. I think everybody that's watching this probably knows this by now. Two very cheap value plays that are in this spot for a reason. Now, Washington one seems a little bit more scary with Gibson and three other guys. I wish they would make some other guys inactive. We'll have to see what happens there. But, with those two guys together in the same game, and then also can you follow it up with Carolina, CMC, the obvious play, value. We talked about upside, everything to do with him at 10K. You've got Jacobs, who's looking popular on the other side as well. So before you talk about them individually, talk to me about playing these running backs against each other in the same game, because typically that's a rule we want to look to build against. But there is some talks around a situation like, with Jacobs, he could bang in a touchdown or two, and then it's all checkdowns to McCaffrey all game, and then he racks up his points that way. So what are your overall thoughts on using these guys together in the same game?
Yeah, I mean, I try not to make hard and fast rules when it comes to roster construction. Ideally, you don't want to take, opposing RB1s against each other. But like you mentioned, if the Raiders build a lead and it's through Jacobs, then that's actually good news for McCaffrey, the PPR upside on DraftKings. And he's the one guy that in the whole slate where you're not worried about his workload. Even with the new coaching staff and all that, new offensive coordinator, I still think they're going to look to get him the ball early and often. And I think he's going to be good for 25 touches in a game at home and a good matchup. So love McCaffrey. I do like Jacobs as well. When we talk about his catching upside, and they keep saying they're going to get him more catches, and then they brought in a bunch of guys that catch the ball out of the backfield, but they got rid of their draft pick. I can't remember his name. And then they also cut Theo Riddick. So I think that bodes a little bit better for his pass catching upside. And even if you don't play him for that reason, I mean, the Panthers were like dead last in DVOA against the run last season. They're returning like 0 starters on the defensive end. They got the youngest defensive unit in the NFL. So I think it's a really good spot for Jacobs, really good spot for McCaffrey. It's a rare spot where I don't mind playing them together, even though they are facing off against each other. And then the two cheap guys, yeah, it's hard not to like Boston Scott. The way I see it, if you liked Miles Sanders at this price with no injury concern, then you should like Boston Scott. I don't think there's a huge drop in talent. And I just think he's going to get a big workload. I don't love that the 3 offensive linemen are going to be out for Philly, but he's just so cheap that I do think the opportunities are going to be there.
And he was getting some targets too, right? And that's I agree. So I think that might actually, the only thing that could help Wentz, back to my take there, is that now he gets some of these quick dropbacks and flips to Boston Scott, and we got to hope that Boston Scott does damage. But I really did like Sanders coming into the week. I liked him coming into the season. I still have a high outlook for him for long term. I think they said today he practiced well. He looked good in practice, but they just couldn't risk it. With a hamstring, it's always going to be too risky, and they need him. But I do like Boston Scott with what you said there, and that's a good reason behind it as well.
Yeah, and then Gibson's kind of the wild card for me. I did have him in my main lineup before the Miles Sanders news. Now I think he's still a strong play at 4K. I do think the trio of C-Mac and Gibson and Boston Scott's going to be very popular. It's easy to kind of fit those 3 in there together. We talk about it a lot. If you play McCaffrey, it kind of forces you onto certain value plays. So one thing I'd be careful about, if you do play McCaffrey, maybe don't play him with those 2 cheap value running backs, because they will be very popular in tournaments.
Agreed. And that's, for me, that's more of a large field stuff. I'm not doing that. That's the easiest. Like I said to someone today over text. I said, Gibson to me is an easy cash play. He's the easiest GPP fade because, whether you want to still use him some, there's guys like you mentioned who we'll talk about here in a second. Chris Thompson is an example at the exact same price as Gibson, where Jacksonville could be checking that ball down back together with Jay Gruden. They liked using them back then. The game flow could set up for him. If Indy does get up and they're down, that's a great play at 4K. There's some talk about James Robinson there in the same game at that price. I just see the game flow going the other way, and I really do. I always like Chris Thompson in Washington. I think he literally caught the touchdown when he hurt his leg and had that major injury and still made it happen. Like, this guy's a grinder, so I'm excited to see him back and play. he'll be fun this week, exciting for large field tournaments. Talk to me about this next range. This is the other, situation. You got, like you mentioned, CMC and the value guys is going to be common. I love it for like a single build, like a main build or like a cash game lineup. I'm okay with it. Outside of that, though, I'm really interested in this range of, Dalvin Cook, Kamara, Eckler, Jones, Jacobs, Mixon, all these guys. Where are you at in this range? Maybe a couple names that stand out to you.
Yeah, I think for the most part, it's going to get overlooked by the masses. Dalvin Cook under 10% is awfully interesting, especially at home. Kamara, Tampa Bay got a really good run defense. I think their defense is going to be improved this year too. But with him, you just got to give him the ball in open space, and I think they will do a good job of that. It's hard to stop the entire Saints offense, so he's going to have plenty of opportunities, especially in the passing game. And then Eckler, I mean, if he gets a lion's share, we'd worry about him a little bit with Phillip Rivers not being there, captain check down. He just makes running backs with all those targets that he gives them. But, I mean, Eckler's a beast, and doesn't look like a lot of people are going to go there. Good matchup against Cincinnati. So I like all three of those guys in tournaments. I also like Joe Mixon as kind of a low-owned option. I originally had him as a core play. Playing at home, I kind of like the Bengals offense quite a bit this year. I think they're going to surprise some people. And got his new contract, doesn't have a ton of competition for carries in the backfield. Giovanni Bernard's still there, but he's not going to play anything more than, extreme pass down situations. So I really like Mixon. I like the price point. I think we can get 20-plus touches out of him. And I actually don't mind the Bengals as kind of a sleeper to win today.
Well, it's interesting. When we didn't talk about Burrow, there is some options there, though. And, yeah, Mixon I like as well. It's, quarterback that's the top of the draft making his first start. So it is going to be an exciting game. I do like it. Didn't talk about Tyrod either. Can quickly mention him. Check down King himself. Maybe, he can do that as well. So it could help out Eckler. You got, for me, Cook, Kamara, the new contract kings, right? Those are the guys just got paid, kind of like that at the top. They're going to come out strong. And then you got Eckler, who I really like. That's the one I like the most. It sounds like Mike Williams is going to go. So I liked him a little more before that. And the other thing is Mike Pouncey, the center for the Chargers, is out. So it took me off. I talked about this as well on the Tourney Takes pod, a little bit off of Tyrod, who I was higher on to start the week with some of these options with Keenan Allen. And if Mike Williams is going to be back, Hunter Henry, Eckler, like they just have a chance to go at it. And now, it makes me think more without that center. It's kind of like the same situation with Boston Scott and Wentz above. O-line center is like the captain of the team, kind of as far as, leading the offense goes there. It's a big part of setting that stuff up. And now you can see even more checkdowns or wide out, tosses to Eckler. So I really like him. And then Mixon, I echo what you said there. The next interesting range for me is with Kenyon Drake, Carson, and Gurley. Those are three guys that I got my eye on. So I think Kenyon Drake, 5% ownership, going way under the radar here in a spot that's great. Like they liked using him. Kingsbury likes setting up with him. It's, no one's really talking about Arizona at all this week. We've seen these games get high scores in the past. Kyler can make it happen. Garoppolo, get a little back and forth going, but Drake sort of gets used no matter what. And I think he fits any game script. So I like him. I like Carson. We already talked about it, but I'm using him in a certain style of build. Remember, it's how you tell the story with your lineups. If you guys haven't seen the show that Blender HD, Jordan Cooper, and myself did to start the season, you definitely want to go back and check that out. Maybe not right now because I know you're watching this and making lineups, but during this week for a little bit of research and just putting your time in to learn up a little bit, I think that's a good show to go back and watch and talk about some of the ways you can piece these lineups together and how you can tell a story and use Lineup HQ to do so. Again, the link will be in the chat. If you guys don't have Lineup HQ access, you are missing out, and you absolutely need to get it as soon as possible to start building your lineups. Whether it's 1, 3, 20, or 150, it's going to be the best tool you can find on the market. So talk to me, Noto, about Drake, Carson, Gurley. Any love on those guys that I just talked about?
I probably won't get to Carson and Gurley, but again, I don't make more than 4 or 5 lineups every week. If you want to build them into, your 20 lineup builds or whatever you want, you can certainly see the game script going in their direction. We talked about a little bit. If Seattle gets out to a lead, that's good for Carson. If Atlanta gets out of the lead, it's good for Gurley. You can maybe play him with some of the Seattle pass catchers. So that's interesting, but I do like Drake quite a bit. Nobody's talking about him. I put him as one of my favorite contrarian plays in the expert survey, but 2 games against the Niners last year, had 10 catches, averaged over 20 fantasy points per game. And we know San Francisco's defense is great, but that doesn't mean they're going to be as good as they were last season. And, this Arizona offense is going to be better than it was last season with DeAndre Hopkins, second year for Kyler Murray. There's not a ton of competition for carries for Drake. So I think it's a really sneaky spot for him. And, with all the value at running back now, it just looks like everyone's going to avoid this range.
Yeah, I think so too. Anybody else you want to talk about here? I mean, when there's so many names you can talk about, we can't do everything because I want to get into a couple things with you on just rules, settings, some stuff there. But, Le'Veon Bell, heard some talk. I mentioned Mac. Obviously, people are talking about Jonathan Taylor in that same game with Mac. Raheem Mostert, keep a spot open this afternoon if Tevin Coleman doesn't go. I think that's another sneaky great play. There's nobody else really there for him anymore to compete with. Breda's gone. You've got situations like that you could use and be a little bit sneaky with. Anybody else in here that you're, taking a shot on, or is it just the obvious values and then sort of the guys we talked about above?
Yeah, probably just the guys we already talked about and then the values. Don't mind Mac, like you mentioned. I listened to your guys' podcast with Killa B last night. So that was a good one. Don't mind that. Don't mind keeping the spot open for Mostert, especially if you can do it in a flex for the afternoon games. Then you can maybe pivot to a different position if you need to.
Definitely want to do that. Get them. Make sure. Again, another thing about Lineup HQ, if you're building your lineups with, there's a one check button. It'll make sure you're always set up for success when it comes to the flex spot, which isn't obvious, you'd think, but you'll see a lot of people in that situation where they can't make it happen. So, looking at it now, gonna go through to the next section. We've got wide receiver now. We want to talk about. Where you at here? We've talked a little bit about Michael Thomas. I'm just checking the time as we go along, guys. Sorry, just trying to make sure. Still got a lot of time here. So Mike Thomas and going down, where you at here in this top range?
Yeah, hard not to like Mike Thomas anytime he's playing in general, especially when he's playing at home. I think it's a really good spot for him. I'm not sure I'll get there in my single entry build, but definitely on my radar, going to have some exposure to him. Not going to have a ton of Julio, but I love Devontae Adams. One of the best wide receiver cornerback matchups that we have on the slate. If you use that tool here at Rotogrinders, you can see that. I think he's in a really good spot. Doesn't have a lot of competition for targets. And we expected the Packers to bring in some help for Aaron Rodgers in the offseason, and they drafted a running back. And they didn't bring in any other receivers. So we know he loves throwing to Adams, even when he's covered. I think it's a really good spot for him. And then the interesting one for me in tournaments is going to be Chris Godwin. I kind of expected his ownership to go through the roof. Once Mike Evans was listed as doubtful, now it sounds like he's going to play. So I don't think anybody's going to end up playing Godwin, even though I think Evans being there might actually help Godwin a little bit. Evans lines up outside. He's going to be locked down by Lattimore. He has a really bad history against Lattimore. And Godwin has a great history against the Saints. Tore him up twice last year. Going to be running, a lot of his snaps out of the slot. So I think Godwin's a really interesting play. That game has one of the higher totals of the game, and it's kind of hard to get exposure to it because everyone's so expensive. But I do like Godwin quite a bit.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Adams to me is, like you said, the obvious one. I think, Aaron Rodgers to Adams is even interesting, but it's large field stuff. Adams for sure. Even if you're using him, you can use Adams together with Dalvin Cook as a secondary stack. I like that one. Maybe, what you want to look at when you're looking at secondary stacks is something like Adams here at 21% ownership is going to be popular, but is he going to be as popular in lineups with Cook when most people have CMC and those two value running backs? So you can look for little situations like that. You could use Adams and Thielen, who we'll talk about in a second. I think you got some love for Thielen down here, where that's a secondary stack that won't be as common. So you can get around chalk and not just have to say, well, I can't play Adams because he's 20%. I have to try Julio out. If you really like Adams more, and I do, then why would I do that when I could just try and work around it in a different manner? So Adams for me, definitely. I like your take there on Godwin. Like you said, even with Evans playing, that would be more interesting because, like you said, then he gets freed up a little bit more. They can't cover everybody. Godwin is an absolute talent at 10.2% ownership. That would be awesome to see, and you could have him opposite of a couple guys. Kamara is one. You could have him opposite of someone like Jared Cook at the tight end position. Again, just talking secondary stacks. There's all these ways to still get exposure to this game and be different. Emmanuel Sanders, who maybe Breeze wants to take for a run. Couple of what now in this league would be considered old guys, right? It makes me old, but I've said this is the way it is. If he wants to find his guy in Sanders, that'd be something else where you could have a Godwin across from Sanders and just, again, mini stack there. What about as we move down? I know, like you said, you've got love for Thielen, so you can talk to me about that, and then maybe a couple more plays below him.
Yeah, I really like Thielen. We have a short memory when it comes to fantasy football, but before the injury last year, he was good. And the year before that, he was one of the most consistent producers on a week in and week out basis. No Diggs in Minnesota anymore. I know they want to run the ball. They want to limit the number of times Cousins is going to throw the ball. But I think Thielen's going to get, 8 to 12 targets. And for everything we've heard in camp is that he's looked great. He's been the best player on the field. He looked good in the dress rehearsal as well. So I really like Thielen. It doesn't look like his ownership's going to be out of control. And he's even cheaper over on FanDuel if you want to get him over there. Then I like Allen Robinson as well. We talked about Mitch Trubisky. Allen Robinson had 147 targets, the third most in the NFL, with Trubisky under center last year. So I think it's a really good spot for him to get going against Detroit. They no longer have Darius Slay. Not that that would have, scared me off for Robinson anyway. But, with David Montgomery banged up just a little bit, I know he's probably going to play. But I think it's a really good spot for Robinson to get going.
Yeah, and I like that too. Like I said, goes with the Trubisky call. I peppered this range personally just because if you look at the ownership, it's 4, 10, 10, 4, and 10. That to me is like right up my alley, and it also forces some different builds. So I got some of those more balanced running back approaches. That should set me up a little bit for success out of the gate. Obviously, anything can happen, but I love your take on Thielen. The DJ Moore thing, I'm not like all over him, but the idea there is quite simple: is that CMC is going to be extremely highly owned. And if it's not CMC and it ends up being DJ Moore that is used, that leverage is just massive in these large field GPPs without going off the board. You're still using their number one wide receiver with Teddy Bridgewater, in the mix now. So I think that's a good leverage play. Allen Robinson, to what you just mentioned. Tyler Lockett's going to go in those stacks with Russell Wilson. If you're doing the Seattle-Atlanta game stacks, I like him. Keenan Allen, interesting one. I liked him a lot more if Mike Williams is going to be out. I know it could be the same situation that we just talked about with Godwin and Evans, but for me, I always like Keenan Allen at a cheaper price and low ownership. Different quarterback scares me. No Mike Pouncey scares me, so I'm not as high on this as I was at the start of the week. That's sort of the benefit of being here for this show every week, and this show's free, so you can find out where I'm at to finish out the week for golf. When I do the show on Wednesdays, I've got all my final takes. It's a premium show we do. It's a lot of fun. But this one here, you guys are getting it all, and I'm trying to give out everything that I possibly can as we go through. Kirk D's promised Killa and I that it's going to be a Stephon Diggs, Josh Allen week. What's your thoughts there? He said it could have been Brown. He did cover his angles, but what's your thoughts on Diggs and the Buffalo pass game?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with this take that one of those two is going to catch a long touchdown, but I don't know which one it's going to be. I don't know. I want to take a wait and see approach with this offense. I like Zach Moss a little bit too, but don't know how many carries he's going to get. So for me, it's a wait and see approach. That game has one of the lowest totals on the board. Maybe it'll burn me, but I don't see it burning me just in the type of contest that I play.
Yeah, I'm with you there, and I'll let it happen. Let have Kirk can take the victory laps next Thursday with me. But I'll go to the next range here. I like sorry, not Diggs. I'm just talking about him. I like Chark a lot, like I talked to you about, and it goes to my Minshew take, so I don't need to elaborate any more on that. I think he's a great play. I think, like I say, it's just 6.4% ownership seems insane. This is a guy that was going off last year when he was healthy. I know when he's out, that sort of changes people's mind. Like say everyone has a very short memory. They maybe don't remember how good he was before that. I think he's a great play. 6.3 again keeps him in that range where not a lot of people are getting to. Everyone's playing the 5K running backs, and we see this in other sports, right? Everyone gravitates to a certain zone. You and I talk about it in golf a lot. Everyone hits a zone and then leaves all these other plays wide open. It's no different in football. Just stacking correlation is a lot more, and it's something you want to pay attention to. But like I said, I already like Minshew, so he's in play there. You mentioned Cincinnati in their game. I know it's with Mixon. What are your thoughts on maybe Boyd, AJ Green, Tate? They've got John Ross. They've got a bunch of guys in there they've been mixing in. What, no pun intended, but what are you doing there in Cincinnati with those guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think Joe Burrow is going to be very good, and I can't wait to see him play. But I do want to see who his favorite receiver is going to be. With AJ Green back, Boyd had the breakout year last year with Green out. So for me, it's a wait and see. But I love the chart call. New offensive coordinator Jay Gruden said they're going to move him all over the field. So he's going to avoid, shadow coverage and that type of stuff throughout the season. So I like that. You can pair him up with Minshew and then even bring it back with a guy like T.Y. Hilton. I know he's got bad outdoor splits throughout his career, but this is a spot where I think the Jaguars are just so bad that the Colts are going to get out and just hammer these guys. And Hilton's a guy that, even with Rivers not being the best deep ball thrower in the NFL anymore, Hilton's got the speed to just break one. And it's only going to take one or two for him to get that 100-yard bonus. And then you're in real good business if the Colts get out to a big lead because of Hilton, because then you have Minshew and Chark playing catch up the rest of the game.
I agree. Quick talk at Ridley at the top. I mentioned him. I like him in both game stacks, any stacks, and then using him as a secondary stack with Carson, like I said. So there's that. But then, you mentioned Hilton. That's what I want to talk about. A couple guys in here, Odell Beckham, T.Y. Hilton. These guys really excite me as far as, forget if their quarterback can throw long, because, neither of them seem to be the best at it between Baker and them. But if you're looking at T.Y. Hilton, it's also a spot where him and Odell are the guys that can just take it from 10-yard slant and be gone with it, right? And so I know we normally like T.Y. Hilton indoors at his own stadium, but I think it's a fine play. I really like him across from my Chark Minshew stacks. I think that's a great sort of single entry 3-max stack that you could go with that would be unique and still get, some of those chalk plays in there. You don't got to have every guy at 1% ownership this week or 5% ownership. You want to exaggerate less. So I don't mind that. I like Beckham again. Like I said, if I'm using something in that game, I would rather use like Odell Andrews as a secondary stack than worry about getting Marquise Brown chalk with Lamar, with Andrews, with Odell. People will have it. You can do it. I'm a Ravens fan. I'm hoping they go off today, but it's not even an emotional hedge. It's more to do with, again, and when I'm building lineups, there's no heart involved. It's all about what makes sense, what can I make money with and win these tournaments. I think that you could win a tournament with that. It'd be ludicrous to say that you couldn't, but I think at the same time, it's like I said, we talked about a lot of other stacks that you can put together and make happen here. Other than that, anybody else down below before we talk about the values, because we know who everybody's on down here, but is there anybody else that stuck out that's sort of low ownership to you?
I mean, not really. We can talk about Marvin Jones. I think he's going to be a really popular play. Same with Terry McLaurin. I think they're both awesome plays. But just real quickly, not to go backwards, but it does look like Dare is going to be inactive for the Jaguars today, so that kind of helps your Chris Thompson take. I think he's going to get all the pass work now. And then Chenault, maybe we can get him in a sec, but he's interesting too with D.D. Westbrook inactive.
Yeah, and I think he can get even some carries, man, or some, handoffs, some different stuff there. So he's certainly an interesting play. I don't mind that one at all. One I was going to talk about here, because again, maybe we won't talk about the obvious values that you just talked about. Everybody knows, Marvin Jones, Terry McLaurin, Marquise Brown, all these guys are 20%-ish owned. They're all great plays for a reason. They're priced what some would say is inaccurately. So you're going to take them and use them in something like a cash game, maybe your main builds, all that, and then work around it. But one that stood out to me here was Jamison Crowder, especially because we're going to segue here to tight end in a second. We'll get Chenault in there, but you got Herndon is getting talked up quite a bit at tight end, and you got a 3% Jamison Crowder at 5.2K. Guy gets like 9-10 targets a game at times. This is something that could really stack up quickly, and he happens to be just a premium leverage play in between all of these 20% owned guys. So any thoughts on Jamison Crowder here? Don't need to stack him up or do anything crazy. I'm just saying use him instead of Herndon or whatever you want to do, but I think he could be in play here at 5.2K.
You make a very good case, for sure. He wasn't a guy that was on my radar. I just don't know if the Jets are going to be able to move the ball. I don't know if they're going to be able to score. If Crowder gets 6 for 60, he's not killing me. So I probably won't go there. We mentioned Marquise Brown is a really highly owned option. He's a wide range of outcomes type of player. He's going to get a lot of deep ADOT targets. And to me, those are the guys that you want to fade when they're going to be highly owned and play when they're going to be low owned, because at 20%, if he comes out and gives you 4 for 40, he's going to ruin 20% of lineups in tournaments. So I still like him as a pairing option with Lamar Jackson, but Blender talks about this a lot. The guys that have those wide ranges of outcomes, you want to avoid them when they're highly owned and play them when they're low owned. And I kind of agree with that for the most part.
Yeah, and that's where I'm with you at, right? You're going to see Lamar run in 2 touchdowns early, and everyone with those stacks be excited. Lamar did his work, right? Or he's going to throw one to Andrews early, run one in, and then everyone's going to be waiting all game for this Marquise Brown. It just takes one. Just one throw. Well, now it's the fourth quarter, and it's over. There's no more throws. It's done. And so I could see that. Another guy, that fits that exact mold that you just talked about is 19% on Deshaun Jackson. You want to talk about him?
Yeah,
same thing.
Put them in the exact same thing. But Washington, really good matchup, and they're missing one of their top corners as well. So it's a great matchup for Deshaun. It's just whether or not the Eagles can give Wentz enough time to get the ball to him downfield. I actually like Deshaun a little bit more than Brown, which
I do.
Yeah. I don't know, because I think you can play Lamar by himself, and then I think if the Eagles pass offense goes off, I do think Jackson's going to be guaranteed to have a big game. Not guaranteed.
Yeah, and one of my main builds, that's sort of the debate, and I'm leaning Jackson over Brown just because I still think Jackson's one of the if you're going to play him week 1, like I said, it might be your only chance to play him. The guy gets injured more than Will Fuller, so I'm going to get him in there in week 1 and try and get that out of him and squeeze a little bit out of him in week 1 and hope that it goes well. Couple pivots I'll just mention quick, and we'll move to tight end. We got about 20 minutes left here, but Robbie Anderson kind of hopped onto the radar late for me. A little bit interesting there with Teddy Bridgewater, and if you're leveraging that CMC play and you want to get in Bridgewater, Moore, and Anderson, you could do something like that. It's one of those plays that has that high upside. It's almost like a Deshaun Jackson at 2% ownership and $200 less. Another guy, Steven Sims Jr. for Washington. Everyone's on Gibson and the run game. This is a guy that could also get some handoffs, some carries, some random stuff, some kick returns, punt returns, things like that at 4,700, or he could just catch the passes and move on that Terry McLaurin chalk and take it and run. So I think that's another interesting play at 4.7. And then you want to talk about Laviska Shenault Jr. here, your guy. What do you got to say about him? Tell me more.
I mean, the beat writers are just saying they can't tell us everything, but he's just been making a bunch of plays in practice and training camp. And it sounds like, with D.D. Westbrook being inactive, that he's going to be, a guy that they go to early and often. And at this price point, it doesn't hurt to be early in large field tournaments. I do like the Steven Sims play. If you're playing something like the Millionaire Maker, you mentioned he might get some carries, and Darius Slay might be shadowing McLaurin. Not that McLaurin can't beat him in one-on-one situations, but if they do end up shutting him down and they do have to air it out a little bit, that could be good news for Steven Sims. You mentioned Robbie Anderson. I don't mind Curtis Samuel in that same game. Anytime Eric Beimfor tags someone, here on Lineup HQ, anytime there's a red tag, you want to take note because he hit so many conviction plays last year. It was crazy. So I always look at his conviction plays. He's also got Anthony Miller there, which is interesting. We talked about Allen Robinson quite a bit. Ruggs. Yeah, both the guys, Edwards too, for the Raiders. They have one of the higher implied totals of the slate, and it doesn't seem like anyone's getting ownership outside of Josh Jacobs. So if the touchdowns don't come on the ground and they come through the air, those two rookie receivers are going to be really interesting.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. First off, the tags. Second, Eric. I mean, just a stud. He's so sharp. I has a great podcast, the Q hunting one. So if you guys check that out on Rotogrinders, that's another thing you want to watch, the stuff with him. So he's got a few guys tagged that I like, and I'm glad you brought that up. Ruggs and Edwards were two guys I'm on for sure. I like them in as a secondary stack with CMC. Again, a lot of people going to be on CMC. Not a lot of people going to be. I mean, 7% is nothing to talk about, and Edwards is even less. So, Samuel, you could have this as a mini stack. Ruggs and Samuel in the same game on the same setup. So we'll leave that there. I'm going to turn that off. We're going to go to tight end quickly and maybe just run me through instead of just clicking through the whole thing. Talk to me about 2 or 3 guys you like at tight end.
All right, the very top, George Kittle, hard not to like him. No Deebo Samuel. Arizona's been the flowchart defense for tight ends like 4 years in a row. He crushed them every time he faced them last year. So no issue with Kittle if you can get up there. He is expensive. But if you aren't playing some of the other studs like McCaffrey or Lamar Jackson, then you can make him work, especially with the value running backs. In the mid-range, I like Hawkinson, but I will go with Hayden Hurst right there. They spent a second rounder to get him from Baltimore. He was a first-round pick by Baltimore. Never really saw his potential there, but no Austin Hooper in Seattle. They're playing at home, and Seattle's been a great matchup for tight ends each of the last couple of years. So I like him. And then if you want to go all the way down, I'm on board with Chris Herndon. I just think he's cheap enough that, he can get catches and pay off that salary pretty easy. Those would be the 3 that I would look at.
Yeah, and I'm with you on a few, actually. Like I said, for Herndon, a main lineup, a cash lineup, something like that, I do like because it just allows everything else to fit. You guys could probably go build the lineup after this and figure out what it is. But, if you do, that's great. We'll chop it up. I just think it's pretty easy to get to sort of a main build with using Herndon in there and some of the other guys we've talked about. With you on Kittle, really like that one for the secondary stack with Drake. And I keep bringing up these secondary stacks because it's been more important. We talked a lot about it when Blender HD and I did the video going through. And it looks like today with, week 1 and everything, we're not going to have as much time to go through all the settings, rules, and all that. I'm going to spend more time on that as we go along. Again, I encourage you to go back and check out the video that Blender HD and I did. It's an hour and 45 minutes long of pretty much everything you can do with our optimizer and the ability to use it. But the secondary stacks are key, right? We talk about those a lot. I like the Kittle and Drake one. I don't think as many people will be on it. And again, naturally, by paying up that much at tight end, you're going to have unique builds while still having great plays. We talked a lot about Kittle and Drake. So that's one for me. I'm in on the Philly guys, Ertz and Goddard. I like them both. They both get usage. They're both cheap. I probably like Goddard a little bit more for the price savings and the usage that he got even late in the season. So I don't mind that. Again, this offensive line thing definitely worries me, but I've also been doing this for a while, and what ends up happening is we overreact to a lot of things. And yes, the O-line is extremely important. It's one of the most overlooked things, I think, even in sports betting. The books don't adjust lines often enough for things like that. So yes, use your Washington D play, which we'll get to in a second. But I think at the same time, you have to remember these guys just aren't all going to get 0 targets and 0 catches and 0 runs. They have to play the game still. So I think you can still use those guys. And then the last one kind of that stuck out for me, I mentioned Eifert as sort of a side play earlier. I definitely like him. Maybe some Shenault, Eifert, super cheap stacks with Minshew Thompson, game stack. Maybe Jacksonville just wins this thing. But anyway, Darren Waller. Any thoughts on Darren Waller? Because I kind of like him as another guy. We talked about Ruggs, Edwards. You could use Darren Waller. This guy is a beast, and people don't really know it. And the ownership shows it at 4.5%. Don't really care that he's 5.9K. I think that's extremely fair for what he can do. And you talked about guys like Deshaun Jackson, and when they're low owned, you'd rather play them. Well, this is the kind of guy you want to play at 4% ownership, in my opinion. What's your thoughts?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's a handful of guys at tight end that you can, see a 100-yard outcome with a touchdown. And Waller's one of them. We mentioned the high implied total for the Raiders. He provides natural leverage off of Josh Jacobs, who's going to be very popular. And again, if the touchdowns come through the air, then it's going to be a good spot for the rookie wide receivers and for Darren Waller. So I like that. And I know you are a narratives guy. Do you worry about Zach Ertz in this contract situation at all?
Yeah, someone just mentioned that Zach Ertz wants that tight end money, and I think that, I think about that stuff, but it's not the same for me in this. I'm looking at more narratives along the lines of like the Chris Thompson with Jay Gruden. I'm going to stick to narratives where, like even with Jared Cook, Darren Waller, the comfortability of a guy like him with Carr. That's now he's feeling good about. So I'm not too worried about Zach Ertz. I think it's going to be a fine play, and whatever happens. He does seem too cheap to me. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, you can go either way with it. You can say he's going to be extra motivated to get a new contract, so he's going to play well, or he's going to be disgruntled and not be fully invested in the season. So yeah, I don't know. I think
I'm always going to side on the narrative of that side. Then, if you're going to say that, I'm always going to side on the narrative of he's going to play well, because if you don't get a long shelf life in football, you better do your damn job if you want to get paid. So I'm sure he's going to go out there and do his job. Like I said, I just think that there's an opportunity for Goddard as well down below. I do like Ertz. He's in my player pool. He's in the mix. A couple other guys. You mentioned Hayden Hurst, Goddard. I talked about. Just trying to see if there's anybody else. Oh, one way off the board play. I mentioned the troll play of the year is about to go down today, I'm sure, is OJ Howard. We tried for 17 weeks last year to make this a thing. It absolutely never worked. And now he's got Tom Brady throwing to him. I'm pretty sure we're going to see an OJ Howard touchdown today. That's my touchdown call of the day. I don't know if it'll make or break your lineups. It might be the only thing he does, but I just know that's coming. Don't you?
All right, I see your ugly tight end play, and I'll raise you one. Robert Tonyan at 2,500, going up against the Vikings. Doesn't have to do much to pay off that salary. We know outside of Devontae Adams, it's pretty ugly there with the wideouts. So if you need a super punt, I don't mind him. And yeah, OJ Howard will troll us. I like that call. I won't be going there, but I could definitely see it happening.
Tonyan with Adams and Rodgers. No one's going to be on it. You can mix those three together. And, that's one thing I noticed too. I mean, still got some time here. We'll get to defense in a second, but, you see it all the time. And so, we're at defense. We're going to talk about Washington D in a sec. So everyone's on Gibson, but not everyone remembers that you can pair up a running back and a defense and plays it like that. So you could use Gibson and Washington D. And now again, with all the Gibson chalk, how much of it is with Washington D? Same situation. What was I just talking about? Was with the tight end. I forget what I was just talking about. I was going to go into a point there, but yeah. Oh yeah. With Adams, it's a wide receiver that everybody's on, but then not everyone remembers. If you're on Adams so much, why don't you mix him with Rodgers and with some guys in that game that are going to pair well together? It seems obvious, but most people start at the quarterback and say what can go with it. And they're not on a guy like Rodgers right now. So if you had have thought of Rodgers first, of course Adams would come up, but many people just see Adams and start using him in secondary stacks and not enough with his quarterback. So that's sort of where I was going with that there. Talk to me about defense. Everyone in the chat loves Washington. I'm only interested to see what their ownership says right now. 9%. It's getting up there for a D, but it's nothing that's too serious. I'm okay with that. Here's the ownership as far as defense is concerned, Noto, and then talk to me about a couple that you like.
Yeah, I mean, I'm on Washington. I liked them before, knowing about Lane Johnson, but that just helps even more. They're just so cheap. They kind of help you spend up everywhere else. So that'll be my favorite, punt play of the day. Plus, they're playing at home. I always tend to gravitate towards the defensive playing at home. Maybe that's not as big of a factor this year with most stadiums not having fans. But, yeah, I like Washington quite a bit. At the very top, don't mind going up to the Bills at home against the Jets. I think it's a really good spot for them. We've seen Sam Darnold turn the ball over a ton throughout his career, and they just don't have very many playmakers in that offense. So those would be my favorite two. But defense generally, I'm not spending a ton of time on it. I'm just looking for teams that are going to be playing with the lead. Or teams that are just cheap and hopefully can get pressure on the quarterback. And I think the Bills provide you that up top and the Redskins provide you that down low. So let's hear your takes.
Yeah, the Patriots being the highest owned is one that I'm not always as excited about. I do like them quite a bit. I did come into the week. I didn't expect this ownership, and I know it's only 15. It's nothing to go crazy about. But I really don't care about defense in the sense of I am looking for the right ones, and I'll name a couple in a second. But I'm trying just to mix and match these as much as possible. It's the most volatile position. There's no way of really knowing, even in season long leagues, which who cares? But I'm just saying I'll just take week to week, pick whoever is the best defense and just flyer them the whole way. So the Chargers I like. Joe Burrow first start. I think they're interesting. You got a guy like Joey Bosa there that no Derwin James, but in the back. But you got Joey Bosa up front. That's going to rattle him a little bit. First game, no fans might be different, right? He's used to a lot of fans at his games as well, even in college. So we'll see how that goes. Washington, we mentioned. Indy for sure. And then the other two that stand out to me, one way down here, 3% ownership is the Seahawks. I think that, again, everyone's wanting to stack the game and all that, but if they don't let Russ go and you just see guys, like I said with Carson, Seahawks and Carson are a good correlation pair that you could put together and just forget the Atlanta side altogether. And people are on Ridley and Hurst and all this and some of their single builds. So I think that's an interesting way to go. And then 2.1K, you want to pivot off Washington. I don't mind the Jets. I know that, Mosley opted out. I know they don't have Jamal Adams anymore. I understand all of that. They're also still only 2.1K, and they're playing a guy in Josh Allen who definitely can throw the ball away, can run out of bounds behind the line of scrimmage, these automatic sacks, all this stuff that they're getting that can add up. And then if they do just pick one up, again, there's maybe not a lot of chemistry there with, I'm going against Kirk now, but you got, Diggs, the reason people aren't as high on it is because Allen's poor long ball. I think there's an opportunity to throw some interceptions. There could be a pick six, scoop and scramble, whatever you want to scoop and score off a scramble, anything like that you could see. Anybody else at defense that you want to talk about, Note, or any other thoughts there?
Yeah, I was going to bring up the Jets because the Blitz has it as their highest point per dollar defense. So don't mind that at 2.1. And yeah, don't mind the Seahawks. Actually, they weren't a team that I was thinking of, but they did pick up who'd they pick up? Jamal Adams. Yeah, like you were just mentioning, that left the Jets.
Opposite of the Jets. Yeah, so I mean, they've got some stuff there to work with. And like I say, just everyone automatically assumes it's go time and all systems go. We could definitely see that shake down to be a little bit more of a ground and pound game between Gurley and Carson. But then I think in the end, Seattle definitely leans out. I've got Seattle quite big today. I like Seattle to take that game. So only a few minutes left here. Any other general rules, groups, stacks, things that you want to talk about in that sense? I know, guys, if that's what you're here for, maybe the next show I'll spend more time on it. I think it's just getting our feet wet. It's week one. We're excited. Try to do a good overview, give you a lot of the inside track of where I'm at with my player pool now. Get some insight from Noto, who's super sharp, is on top of his stuff as far as main lineups and everything are concerned. So any other final thoughts for the people, Noto?
Yeah, I mean, if you're playing tournaments, just don't be afraid to load up on those stacks. We say it time and time again, just not enough people are stacking. Everyone thinks just a quarterback with the receivers enough, but that's not going to be enough for you to win a large field tournament. Think about correlation. Think about how to be different. You mentioned a lot of secondary stacks of ways to get highly owned guys into your lineups with some correlation that's going to help you, separate yourself from the field. We talked about like Devontae Adams, bringing it back with somebody on the other side that, maybe Dalvin Cook that is not going to be highly owned. So just think about all that kind of stuff while you're building lineups. As far as defense goes, look, somebody's going to score a random touchdown. I would kind of just, get exposure to quite a few defenses. No need to lock in one defense. It's just so random. I wish they would do away with defenses. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be a fun week one. Don't be afraid to avoid groupthink. We think we know all these teams, but at the end of the day, we don't really know what they're going to do. We don't know their tendencies. We don't know how these offenses are going to run, how the defense are going to play, especially with no preseason. We could see a lot of, guys coming in and out of the lineup, not playing a full complement of snaps. We kind of saw that on Thursday a little bit in the Thursday night game. So just a lot of unknowns. And when there are a lot of unknowns, it doesn't hurt to be contrarian. Don't be, dumb with it. Don't just take a random guy that's 1% owned just because he's 1% owned. But don't be afraid to avoid some of the groupthink, build some correlation into your lineups and go from there.
Yeah, and I tried to do a better job of bringing that together today just to explain to you guys, when it comes down to it, it's you, especially week one. I think last year it was like the year, or maybe it was the year before, where a guy with the name Chalk actually won the Millie Maker because, it was like, and his lineup was basically all chalk with just a couple one-offs. You're not trying to get a completely unique lineup across the board. That's nice. You want to be unique as a whole, no matter what in the tournament. So you still want to look for ways to do it. But what I tried to show you today and what I'll continue to do on this show is to try and show you guys ways to be unique within a situation, leverage it. Like we talked about with, instead of playing Jacobs, play Waller. Waller's not a bad play. He's just going to be much lower owned than a guy like Jacobs. And then you can still use a chalkier play, but probably a great play, and a guy like CMC in that same build and be unique that way. Another thing, as you mentioned, is all the unknowns is, talked about it. Most stadiums won't have fans. Nobody had a preseason. There's lots of there's the concerns of COVID-19 and all the stuff with the shutdowns and restarts and everything that's going on as far as, air control in Arizona, San Francisco. Definitely be on the news, be on the hunt for the news for that. It looks like it's going to go, but anything could happen. There are so many unknowns. Don't be afraid to mix in some of these wide receiver 4s or things that you heard about in camp. But then again, if you've got one of those guys in your lineup that are probably going to be 0.5% owned, you don't need to go extremely off the board everywhere else. You don't need to get crazy with it. You just need to get smart with some of these crazy plays. So it's all about the overall construction. Like I said, can't stress it enough. You'll want to get Lineup HQ. If you don't have it already, get on board, join the Core 4 Premium. The link's been dropped in the chat. You guys can join up there. If you like the show, give it a like, subscribe to the channel. We'll be here every week. I'm going to be going over maybe a different guest every week, but you're going to be able to see what we do with this. And then this week, I encourage you again, go back and watch the video that Blender and myself did to go into how we're using all this information we gave you to build your lineups and to put them in the right position. I always say this, right? Put yourself in the position to get lucky. It's hard to win a GPP, especially one, my biggest goal today is to win the Millionaire Maker that has 1 million people. That would be the ultimate trophy title to put on your board. You won the $5 Millionaire Maker for $1 million that had over 1 million people, but it's going to be extremely tough. So you just have to build the lineups that can put yourself into the spot to have yourself a chance to get lucky later in the day. Keep an eye out for late swaps. If you're not on Lineup HQ, get on it. Use that button so that you have the flex positions open. Other than that, appreciate you guys. Thank you, and good luck.
The NFL is back, and so am I, baby. Back in the Fantasy Bar with 6 of my favorite plays for Week 1 on FanDuel and DraftKings, including what games I'm going to be stacking up, a value tight end I think you got to get in your lineup, an off-the-radar quarterback receiver stack, and some workhorse running backs I think are vastly underpriced. You need to jam in your lineups. Who are we talking about? Belly up to the Fantasy Bar and find out. Welcome in, guys. Week 1 edition. NFL is back. Welcome into the Fantasy Bar presented by our friends over at Manscaped, who is the best in men's below-the-waist grooming. Manscaped offers precision-engineered tools for your family jewels. They obsess over their technology developments to provide you the best tools for your grooming experience. Guys, good to be back here in the Fantasy Bar talking NFL football. Week 1, we're going to cover the main slate on both FanDuel and DraftKings. Before we get into my favorite plays, guys, do me a favor. Make sure you hit that thumbs up button on YouTube. Tells me you're having a good time in the Fantasy Bar and enjoying the videos. Also, make sure you subscribe to the channels so you get notified when the videos are coming out. And just for hanging out here in the Fantasy Bar, special offer for you guys, limited time offer. Head over to rotogrinders.com/beer for $5 off a Core 4 premium subscription. Going to cover you for NFL, NBA, MLB, and PGA Tour golf. Ton of great tools there, including our revolutionary lineup HQ tool. Guys, this thing is a game changer. Make 1 to 150 lineups in a matter of moments. Projections, ownership projections, everything you need in your DFS tool belt. Rotogrinders.com/beer. All right, let's talk some Week 1. We weren't sure we're going to get football, but here we are. Couldn't be more excited. Let's start at the running back position with Josh Jacobs of the Raiders. Now, I've been very vocal all summer long on my disdain for Josh Jacobs and some of these best ball drafts, things like that, looking over the course of the entire season. But this Week 1 matchup is truly one that we want to take advantage of here. There was not another team that even came close to giving up as many fantasy points to the running back position as the Carolina Panthers. They actually lapped the field. The gap was about 4 fantasy points per game to the second worst team. And also, as you'd expect, dead last in DVOA against the run were the Panthers as well. And I didn't see many major improvements to this defense. So yes, they spent a lot of draft capital there. I still expect this defense to be atrocious here. You look at the game, the spread, the total, Vegas, a road favorite here, so it's generally where I want my running backs to be favored, and a big total here. So I think both teams going to put some points on the board. But Josh Jacobs under 7K on DraftKings, just a tick above 8K on FanDuel, should get that workhorse role, hoping he catches some more passes than we saw last season. But regardless, these prices are too cheap. The matchup as good as it gets. Josh Jacobs leading off here in week 1. All right, let's get you a tight end value play, in fact, with Hayden Hurst of the Falcons. So another good matchup here, and this is a game a lot of people are going to be targeting, no doubt. But let's look at this tight end matchup specifically in Seattle. Bottom 5 last season in allowing fantasy points to the tight end position. We know Austin Hooper off to Cleveland. In comes Hayden Hurst from Baltimore. They paid a pretty penny to bring this guy in. A second-round pick, nothing to sneeze at here. And Austin Hooper saw 7.5 targets per game in this offense. So we know they're going to throw a ton. Led the NFL in passing attempts last season. I think they'll be one of the leaders here again. And with guys like Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley, Todd Gurley on the field, should get plenty of opportunities in the middle of the field towards the red zone. And the defensive coverage is going to have to focus on all those other guys. Add it all up. Hayden Hurst in for a big year. And it's going to start here in week 1 against Seattle. All right, we like that game. Let's go to the other side at wide receiver. We're going to go with Tyler Lockett of the Seahawks. So looking at some early ownership projections, looks like DK Metcalf may be the highest owned receiver on the slate. So let's go ahead and pivot to teammate Tyler Lockett. The beauty of this team, we know where the ball's going to go. These two guys are going to get the ball. And yes, you pay a little bit more for Lockett, but let's get a fraction of the ownership while everybody else is on DK Metcalf. No issues with Metcalf as a play in this game, a phenomenal spot against this Falcons secondary. But Lockett, the guy I want at much lower ownership. We look back to last season, these two teams played this exact game in Atlanta, 6 for 100 in that game. So not a monster game, but he did hit that bonus. And I think this is going to be another year where this Falcons secondary is absolutely horrible. So Atlanta, a team you're going to want to stack up. We talked Hurst, but Ryan, Julio, Ridley, all these guys in play. I like going to Tyler Lockett as the running back option on those stacks, even if not. Mid-6s price is fair on both sites. FanDuel, a little bit too cheap at $6,800. Let's take advantage in this dream matchup with this Atlanta Falcons defense. All right, let's get you a low-owned quarterback play. A guy I don't expect many people to be on this week is Jimmy Garoppolo of the Niners. Now, I know he doesn't give you the running upside that some of these other guys give you, but what he does give you is huge upside with this matchup. He absolutely dominated this Arizona team last season in 2 games, threw for 741 yards and 8 touchdowns, averaging 33 DraftKings points a game in those matchups. Again, we look at the Arizona defense, and yeah, it may be slightly improved, but this is still a fantastic matchup for Jimmy Garoppolo. Team total way up there, second highest on the slate at 27 here. And I know the Niners more of a running team here, but history says Garoppolo going to do well in this matchup. I'm not going to disagree with that. I like the prices here. I like the ownership under 5% here. Jimmy Garoppolo going to be a big part of my week 1 builds against Arizona. All right, who do we pair Garoppolo up with? Well, George Kittle will be too easy. We're going to go wide receiver Kendrick Bourne. So again, Kittle, a great play. We know Arizona struggles against the tight end as well, but Bourne, the guy I'm going to go with here. Deebo Samuel, we'll see. We still have injury questions on the San Francisco receiver front. Brandon Ayuk, we'll see if these guys are playing. And regardless, I still like Kendrick Bourne here. Going to be super low owned, even though those guys are out. If they are in, he's going to be mega low owned here. He's really shown a good rapport with Garoppolo all through training camp here. These guys have connected, and it might be the last man standing kind of thing. But Bourne has certainly stood out. We can go back and look at last season, scored a touchdown in each of those games they played against Arizona last season. So we get him low owned, we get him in a great matchup here, and a nice total again for the San Francisco 49ers. Add it all up, Kendrick Bourne, great value, off the radar value, and a nice stack with Jimmy Garoppolo here against the 49ers. All right, it's time to take a look at my favorite play for week 1. But before we do that, guys, I got to tell you about my friends over at Manscaped. That's right. We've all had that time where we were trimming things up down below and nicked something. Well, guess what, guys? Manscaped has redesigned the electric trimmer. The Manscaped engineering team spent 18 months perfecting the greatest ball hair trimmer ever created and just released a new and improved Lawnmower 3.0. The 3rd generation trimmer features a cutting-edge ceramic blade to reduce grooming accidents thanks to advanced skin-safe technology pioneered by Manscaped. And guys, when I tell you this is premium, I mean premium. The battery will give you 90 minutes for a longer shave. Waterproof technology is going to allow you to groom in the shower. And one of the coolest things, comes with a LED light, which illuminates grooming areas for a closer, more precise trim. They've also upgraded to a 7,000 RPM motor with quiet stroke technology. And let's not forget the charging stand. You can show your mower off loud and proud because this intelligently designed stand is a convenient charging dock powered by USB. Guys, you are hearing my voice right now. I want you to experience this thing for yourself. Got to trim that junk ears, get 20% off and free shipping with the code BEER, B-E-E-R, at manscaped.com. Your balls will thank you. All right, let's take a look. My favorite play for week 1, you know, Mass, the beast of the week. All right, beast time. We owe you one more running back. I promised you a discounted workhorse, and that's what we get with Joe Mixon of the Bengals, this week's beast of the week. So the Cincinnati offense, I'm really expecting good things here. Now, we know the offensive line was an issue last season. When you get Jonah Williams back, I think they'll be much improved. You get the number 1 pick, obviously Joe Burrow, weapons galore at wide receiver. I think this offense is going to surprise some people here, and I think that's going to start here in week 1. Now, the team total a little bit lower than I was hoping for, but this Chargers defense took a big hit with the loss of Derwin James. They ranked 25th last season against the run, so I think they're vulnerable here in this department, and I'm expecting Joe Mixon to be a much bigger part of the passing game here as well. But these prices, way too cheap. We saw at the end of last season, they're going to give this guy the ball a ton. They just paid him almost $50 million. Joe Mixon going to be the centerpiece here. Workhorse running back without the workhorse prices. Get Joe Mixon in those week 1 lineups. Easily my favorite play for week 1 and this week's beast of the week. All right, guys, that'll wrap us up here for week 1 in the fantasy bar. We're going to run it back with our beast of the week contest. If you're new to the fantasy bar, all you got to do, get in the comment section right below the video and let me know your guess in fantasy points for Joe Mixon on DraftKings. Closest guess will win themselves a free week of Rotogrinders Premium to check everything out we've been talking about. Or if you're already a loyal subscriber, we'll send you a free Rotogrinders t-shirt. So get in the comment section. Let's talk about the picks. Let me know who some of your favorite plays are as well. And guys, don't forget, head over to manscaped.com. Promo code BEER for 20% off along with free shipping. That's manscaped.com. Promo code BEER for 20% off and free shipping. For Rotogrinders.com, I am Beer saying salut. Best of luck here in week 1, guys. Good to be back, and we'll see you.
Hey, thanks for checking out our videos. If you want more expert advice on DraftKings, FanDuel, or any other daily fantasy sports, make sure you check out the current videos playlist.
The NFL is back. It's
Hey guys, what is up? Welcome to Crunch Time. It is NFL edition. Boy, it is exciting to be able to say that. We are pumped to have some NFL, and I'm joined by two very sharp NFL minds. We have one, Mr. Dan Gasper, aka Mr. Tuttle. Hey Tuttle, how are you?
I'm good if I can get my mic back on off of mute. I realized I was without water, so I had to grab one of my wife's sparkling waters, which I'm not a huge fan of, but didn't have time to run downstairs.
You got to hydrate. I have a mini fridge within reach, and there's like
that's mine.
Pretty good odds that there will be a beer grabbed from that mini fridge before the end of the show. Also, we are joined by Christy Metzger. Hey, Christy, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for letting me join you guys. I'm pretty excited for week 1.
Well, we are pumped to have you here. We're pumped to get your analysis. I was telling you before the show, I just got so busy. I pre-entered a bunch of, contests. I have not looked at a single thing. So we need to help me out. We need to help the people out. And you are the person to do it because you have been at the very top of the leaderboard many times, and we're going to do it again, right?
Absolutely. Today's the day.
Okay. I love it. I love that confidence. Guys, this is also, by the way, we're going to be taking questions. If you are on the Rotogrinders website, if you're in the videos, I can get your questions there. Also, we've got our Discord running, so I will be in the Crunch Time Discord. So 2 different spots. I'll kind of alternate between the 2. But I thought if it works with you guys, we would do this like we do every other Crunch Time, position by position. Then we'll talk stacks, and then, we'll take some questions. That sound good?
It's perfect.
For me.
Yeah. How about some weather talk, too? You guys interested in a little of that?
Yeah, I mean, you're going to be out of your comfort zone, I think, a little bit this week, right?
No, I kind of am. Honestly, the weather is not the weather that I'm used to because we've got the fire risk, which I've never had to deal with before. But we'll start with what I do know. That is Buffalo. The rain is clearing out of Buffalo. Everyone thinks it's going to be wet and windy. It's not going to be wet and windy. It's just going to be windy. The rain is literally ending right now, and I don't expect we're going to see any more. So maybe still a little bit soggy out there, but the wind is coming in over 20 miles per hour. That's a pretty significant wind. I, as a meteorologist, will be playing no one in that game because of the wind. But perhaps there's an ownership advantage. Christy, is there anyone in the passing game that you're interested in? Whether it's chalk or if it's just an ownership idea?
In the Buffalo game?
Yep.
Yeah, no, there really isn't. I don't really have too much focus on that particular game.
Excellent. Okay. Well, then that makes that easy. If you guys, if you want to throw a dart on it because you think it'll come in at super low ownership, go for it. But I don't love it. Jacksonville is the other one I'm watching. We do have the winds aren't as strong, 10 to 15 miles per hour. There will be some off and on rain in that game. I don't think you need to really worry about it. Tuttle, what do we have there in Jacksonville? What kind of players that you're interested in?
When you want the defense, the Colts defense, I think is going to be chalky, so that could help, right? But yeah, I mean, it's mostly concentrated around the rushing attacks in that game and then defense, which sounds okay.
Yeah, that's excellent. We prefer that in the rain, actually. So that is a benefit. And then also we've got that. Oh, someone said, hey, what about the Buffalo defense? I love it. I love the defense in those games. I love it. And I don't even know if they're any good, but I just love the idea of it. And then we've got the San Francisco and the LA games, both of which are open air, both of which have the wildfire risk. I am operating under the assumption that both of those games are playing. The AQI, the air quality index in San Fran, was at 150 and falling last I checked. It needs to be at 200 or worse for them to consider postponing it. So I think it's going to be okay. I don't have I'm not some sort of wildfire expert here, but I don't think that's going to be a huge issue. So are y'all going about your day as if those games are going to be played?
I mean, I think so. The Rams game at least is not on the slate, so we don't have to deal with that,
Okay.
Which is nice. I guess it's on Yahoo's main slate. The thing with San Francisco, I think the big thing that you want to do is just make sure you have swaps available and ready. That's something you should predetermine. Don't be left scrambling because this is, maybe if it's like an 80-20 chance, 80% that this game plays, you'll still want to just play for the chance that it doesn't. So just make sure you have your swaps ready. The big news surrounding that, though, too, is that Tevin Coleman might not play because he has sickle cell disease.
Yeah.
So I actually have a few lineups set up where I'm planning on playing Raheem Mostert, but then I'm also able to swap to Kenyon Drake if I want to, if Coleman plays. So I think that's another way to attack that game specifically, is because, man, if we knew for sure Coleman was sitting, Mostert would be one of the best value running backs on the slate. So I do think you want to find ways to get exposure to him.
Okay, interesting. Christy, any interest in Coleman if he is in, or is this just if he's out, that's when we care?
Yeah, just if he's out. I do have some interest in Kenyon Drake. I mean, he's someone that I'm kind of keeping an eye on for sure. I think he's a really good value play today. And so just like Tuttle said, you want to kind of have some swaps available just in case, that game doesn't end up playing.
Okay, good stuff. Well, I think we dive into the slate. We're going to have to keep him kind of quick here because there's a lot to get through, and lock is coming up. Kickoff is coming up on the season. So why don't we start things off? Christy, you can go first. We will talk the old quarterback position. What is your game plan here?
Yeah, so at quarterback, I think, with Boston Scott kind of coming into play yesterday, with Miles Sanders sitting out, I think it's a little bit easier to get up to Lamar Jackson. I think he makes just a fantastic play in cash games and kind of more of an optimal play. I also very much like, Russell Wilson and Matt Ryan. I think that the Atlanta-Seattle game is going to be a fantastic game to look at. And so those are a couple of quarterbacks that I think make great plays too. But I think Lamar Jackson really opened up a little bit, once we kind of got the Scott news that he was going to be in. It just opened things way up for us.
Okay. Is it a naked Lamar, or are you pairing the Lamar?
Yeah, well, I think you can play him naked. I really do. Even though I do like to stack, I think Marquise Brown, Hollywood Brown, I think makes a great play. He's 5,900 on FanDuel, 5,100 on DraftKings. I think he just makes a very good play too, and you could work him into an optimal lineup. Okay,
Tuttle, how about first off your take on those, and then maybe somebody under the radar that you're looking at? Because I want to play someone garbage. Because there's 2 million people that I have to beat. So I need to play someone terrible that's going to go off.
Well, I do think there are builds where you might have to go cheap at a quarterback. So I'll talk a little bit about those. I do think, like Christy said, I think Lamar Jackson's kind of the spotlight in the builds where you can pay up at quarterback. And I think that's probably going to be the most popular build. But both on FanDuel and DraftKings, if you get off Jackson, you can do a little bit different things with spending up at the wide receiver position if you want, or spending up at those other running back positions. So some guys here, I have our lineup HQ up here, and that's what you guys are looking up at the screen share. I have Blitz, which is Derek Carty's projection system. So even if you just go to whichever site you're playing on, DraftKings or FanDuel, and sort by point per dollar, you can see some of these guys that are kind of popping as more value options on the slate. Not very interested in Dwayne Haskins as a cash game option. I think if you're looking at kind of cash game options on DraftKings where you're not playing Lamar, I think you're probably looking at a Cam Newton, who's 6,100, who Cardi's projections actually don't like a whole lot. But he's there at 6,100. Or if you have to go even cheaper than that, you're looking at like maybe a Tyrod Taylor in cash. I don't feel all that comfortable going that route, but I know I've been talking to a lot of people throughout the week, and I know there are people that are making Tyrod Taylor cash game builds out there. Again, I don't feel completely comfortable with that. I would rather get up to Cam Newton if possible as my kind of cheap cash game option at quarterback. But I do think those are the two cheap options you're probably picking from in cash games, are Cam Newton and Tyrod Taylor.
Okay. Why don't we, anyone in a tournament that you're like, oh, there's the guy that I want to throw a dart on?
Yeah, I can say Christy already mentioned Russell Wilson. Love him in double stacks. I love him a lot just because where where he's throwing the ball. It's a very concentrated pass offense. It's going to be DK Metcalf. It's going to be Tyler Lockett. Those guys are going to account for 60 to 70% of the targets. That's probably a little extreme, but could be 60 to 70% of the targets. So they're just getting a lot of the volume. A cheap guy, seems crazy. I do like Teddy Bridgewater a little bit, and you see if the projections do like Teddy Bridgewater as a value option as well. We're hearing a lot of things about Carolina's offense with Joe Brady there now as the offensive coordinator, getting a lot of hype, and that this game could be a shootout, Carolina versus the Raiders. And I actually think it is going to be a shootout. So I do like Bridgewater. You can pair him with McCaffrey. That's fine. McCaffrey catches a lot of gets a lot of balls throw in his direction, but you can also go DJ Moore, who's going to be low, or pair him with Curtis Samuel, who's kind of a cheaper option, who's going to be lower owned as well.
Okay, excellent. Christy, any other tournament darts there at quarterback?
I'll mention one other one. I was a little bit higher on him before I knew David Montgomery was actually going to play, but actually wrote Trubisky up as a GPP play. I know it sounds crazy, and I'm not a Trubisky, I don't use him a lot, but I think this week, he's the starter. He's got Foles kind of breathing down his neck. He's got Miller and Robinson, and he always plays against Detroit very, very well. If you look at the matchup from last year. So, and I think a couple of weeks last year too, he took down the Millionaire Maker, having a Trubisky lineup in there. So I think he's someone to consider. He'll be very low owned. Like I said, not quite as high on him, but he's someone that you can maybe put in your player pool if you're mass multi-entering.
Okay, excellent. Let's run this on to running back. Tuttle, I know there's a lot about, what is it? Scott is the, will you play Boston Scott or not is the question of the week.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's an absolute lock in cash games. I'm getting around to, my original take was he's going to see so much work, you just play him in tournaments as well and eat the chalk.
Yeah.
But it is football. Anytime you have a guy, we have him here projected on FanDuel at 32% ownership. I think honestly that might be a little bit low. We have him 34% on DraftKings. Again, I think that's low, and especially as you go higher up in stakes and get lower prize pool tournaments, I think his ownership's going to get into that 50% range. Man, it's football. Anytime you can get a player that's going to be 50% owned, you can definitely fade him. There are actually concerns with the offensive line in Philadelphia today as well. Peters is out. Lane Johnson's out. Kelsey's the one that's injured. Kelsey might not make the full game. Lane Johnson's out. So he has some issues with the run blocking that I don't think people are really too concerned about, just because they see, he's only 4,800 on DraftKings, 4,700 on FanDuel. It's not a big deal. But man, on FanDuel, you're going to need a touchdown out of him. And there's a possibility he doesn't get that touchdown today. So yeah, I think you lock him in cash games, but I think he is actually an excellent tournament fade.
All right, Christy, any difference of opinion there, and what other running backs are you looking at?
Yeah, so no, I agree. I think because of his ownership projection, I think he is a fade candidate. Like you said, with football, anything can happen. And I know earlier in the week, Antonio Gibson was carrying some traction too. And so it'll be interesting to see where his ownership, it's projected at maybe like 9.5% now. But Christian McCaffrey, I think, is going to carry a ton of ownership. And again, because you have Boston Scott that you can use, in flex or as a running back, I think his ownership only increases now. So I do like him a lot. I like Delvin Cook quite a bit too. I kind of started coming on to him more at the end of the week when some of this value opened up. Also like Joe Mixon a little bit as well. And Chris Carson are a few that I'm kind of looking at.
Tuttle, some other running backs?
Yeah, so I mentioned if you want to play the Tevin Coleman news, setting up Raheem Mostert is somebody I think you should absolutely have exposure to. Again, setting your teams up where you can just pivot off of him into like Kenyon Drake, I think is fine. I like Drake quite a bit. I think he's really cheap. Yeah. He's going to be lower owned. Let me see what we have for ownership projections. We have him at 8% on FanDuel, and I assume he would be lower owned than that, even on DraftKings potentially. 5% on DraftKings. So yeah, I do actually think Kenny Drake. We saw him actually tear apart the San Francisco defense the first time he faced them last season. I think he topped 30 DraftKings points in that performance. Not going to expect that from him, but it's not as terrible of a spot as people think. 49ers defense is a little injured as well. They have some guys that could miss that are on the injury report. So that's something to keep an eye on with them as well. Somebody else, I don't know if Christy mentioned, she might have, Josh Jacobs, I think, is a guy that's going to be relatively high owned. And I do like him. This Carolina defense is going to be absolutely terrible. So I know people are going to be attacking Carolina from all sides. I think Jacobs should get a very, very healthy workload. He is an excellent option in all formats. And then we'll talk about their passing attack later on as well. But I think basically anyone from this Carolina Raiders game is in play in tournaments. And I think they're excellent plays in tournaments.
Okay. I think we can move along to wide receivers. And now is Evans out or is he questionable? What was the latest there?
Trending towards playing, but it's kind of sounds like he might be a decoy or limited in some fashion.
Okay. Because there would have been some relief there, but now random bench receiver is no longer of any interest.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I would actually rather him be inactive just because I don't think those bench receivers are very good plays on this slate anyway. What it would really do is I think it would skyrocket Godwin's value. But I also think if you think Evans is going to be limited in any fashion, then Godwin is still, a fine play as well.
Gotcha. We'll talk about some of the other receivers, Tuttle.
Yeah. So speaking of injuries that have opened up receivers, Marvin Jones is one of those guys that really got opened up with the Kenny Galladay injury. He's going to be a very popular play across the industry. I think he's fine. I don't think he's an absolute must play. I think most projection systems will almost peg him as a must play, but I don't necessarily think he is. On FanDuel, you just have so many good cheap options. You have Marquise Brown, who Christy mentioned before. He's cheaper than Marvin Jones. You have Terry McLaurin, who's a very good play in that same price range. You have the Seattle receivers in the same price range. You have Adam Thielen in the same price range. So like I said, I think Marvin Jones is a good play, but I'm fine playing with all those other guys in cash games actually as well, which is kind of crazy to say, but it does show that there's actually significantly more depth at the wide receiver position this week than there is at the running back position. On DraftKings, one price tag that specifically stands out to me is Devontae Adams at just 7,300. I think that's just way too cheap for him. The Vikings are completely changing out their cornerback. They have 3 whole new cornerbacks they're starting for them. And they're just not going to be that good defensively. They'll be all right, but I think it's a really good matchup against Devontae Adams, who's talented in his own right. So matchup doesn't matter all that much, but it is against a team that's going to struggle a little bit, I think, defensively in the secondary.
Okay. Christy, wide receivers?
Yeah, I agree with Tuttle. There's so many good plays right in that mid-tier range this week that it'll be interesting to see where ownership lies. But, Devontae Adams, like you mentioned, is a great play up top, and Michael Thomas, of course. But then you've got Deshaun Jackson, too, where, he's pretty cheap on FanDuel and I think $4,900 on DraftKings. I think he makes a great play. And then you've got Lockett and Metcalf getting some exposure to that game, and Marvin Jones and Thielen. So you've got a whole bunch that are kind of in that range. And then a couple of guys that I think are going to get overlooked are, one, you got T.Y. Hilton. That's kind of in that mid-tier range. And then a guy that I've started to come on to a little bit more toward the end of the week is Odell Beckham. If you're looking to, bring someone back in that game, I think, he makes an interesting option. He hasn't traditionally done well in that matchup before, but, he's still Odell. And with this price tag, I think makes a very interesting GPP play.
Okay. Anything else there at wide receiver? Surely.
Yeah, I'll mention, I kind of mentioned them offhand with the Bridgewater talk, but DJ Moore, Curtis Samuel, both fine tournament options. Moore is obviously the better candidate if you have the money for him, but he is quite a bit more expensive than Curtis Samuel. And then opposite of that game too, on the Swolecast, I have Brian Edwards as my terrible take of the week. He's 4,500 on FanDuel, 4,200, I believe, on DraftKings. But Henry Ruggs is fine as well. Yeah. Both rookie receivers starting for Las Vegas. And again, it's an excellent matchup. So I love all receivers in that game in tournaments.
Okay. Then I believe we move it to tight end. Christy, what do you got?
Yeah, so for tight end, it's we've got some interesting, a lot of good options, actually, if you look at it. So you've got Zach Ertz, who I think will carry a fair amount of ownership. But again, in that mid-tier, again, you've got guys like Hayden Hurst, so if you're looking to get exposure to the Atlanta game, he makes a lot of sense. I also like Rob Gronkowski a lot, too. I think for his price, it's about $3,000 cheaper than it would have been a few years ago when he was playing with Brady in New England. And so, I'm definitely interested in having some exposure to him. I also like TJ Hawkinson. And I think, now that they're missing Galladay, I think he makes a fine play and a good pivot away from some of that Marvin Jones chalk. And then Chris Herndon, too, is another one. I think they're going to be using him in some wide receiver sets, not just as tight end. So I think he makes some sense as well. Those are a few of the guys, I guess, that I'm looking at.
Excellent. Tuttle.
Yeah, I think it's a little dependent on the sites that you're playing on. I think the more expensive tight ends are a little bit more accessible on FanDuel specifically, just because of the softer pricing. So if you're not able to get the money for George Kittle on DraftKings, I think he's a little bit more accessible on FanDuel. So he's an excellent option. Otherwise, it's a lot of the people that Christy mentioned. I think we're actually a little backwards here on what we have for ownership projected for Hawkinson versus Hurst. I think Hawkinson's actually going to be the more owned player over Hurst. So I actually would almost reverse that, where I think Hawkinson's in playing cash games and Hurst would be the guy that I would take in tournaments. I do like him quite a bit as a tournament option. And then there are things, if you want to like get really, really crazy, like a Logan Thomas is super cheap on FanDuel, 4K on FanDuel, 2,800 on DraftKings. I don't have very many lineups where I'm actually playing him, but if you're just trying to jam in expensive players everywhere else, I think that's fine. Darren Waller, high upside play in that matchup that I keep talking about, and he's going to be really low owned, 5% we have him around. So yeah, lots of different ways to go like Christy said, but I think in cash games on FanDuel specifically, you're kind of either paying up, and then on DraftKings, I think Chris Herndon is kind of the cheap value option that you would play on is your tight end cash game option on DraftKings. And then Hawkinson's 900 more than Herndon on DraftKings, which makes it a little bit more difficult to get him there.
Okay. How about some defense really quick, and then we'll talk stacks and questions. Do you care when you're building a team? Do you even care, or just like wherever the money lands, I just pick a random defense? Because it's so hard to predict.
Well, that's a great point. It's so hard to predict, yet we know where a lot of ownership's going to settle in on, just based on ownership projections, what's going to come in at chalk, also by ownership projections here. I think personally on FanDuel, the Colts are going to be extremely, extremely high owned. I think they are the cash game play for cash defense. But I think in tournaments, anytime you think that there's going to be a defense that's going to be extremely chalky, and I think Colts are going to be extremely chalky on FanDuel this week, I don't want any part of them. If they get their 2 touchdowns, they're going to bury me. But I'd rather, like Ralph said, it's a high variance position, and I'd rather just pivot off of them. My favorite pivot, not in the exact price range, but I like the Chargers quite a bit this week. Very good defensive line against one of the worst against one of the worst offensive lines in the league right now. Rookie quarterback back making his debut. So I do like the Chargers. Is kind of my favorite tournament defense, I think, of the week.
All right, Christy, defense.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. I have the Chargers in as my GPP play too, Tuttle. So I think that's a great play. Like you said, going up against a rookie quarterback, it makes some sense. They're a little bit more expensive than the Colts. I do think they'll be extreme chalk, especially on FanDuel. They're a little bit cheaper on DraftKings, I think at $2,800. But I do like the Patriots. D have a little bit of interest. They're a little bit more expensive, of course. Trying to think of some other ones too, but yeah, I would say it's a pretty small pool, but I'm trying to get away from some of the Colts chalk on FanDuel in particular.
No interest in the Jets defense.
You're talking DraftKings, right? You want cheap D?
I want cheap D in bad weather.
Washington. Yeah.
Cheap, yeah. If you want the bad weather at Jets,
I only
do think
play
Washington
based on weather. It's the only factor I look at. So,
I mean, if you want to add, offensive line injuries into which defenses you play, you could do that too. And we talked about earlier, Philadelphia's O-line without Lane Johnson, Kelsey might not make it through the game. Washington football team's defense is in a pretty good spot there, and they actually have a good defensive line too. So. They're the stone minimum on DraftKings, and I think they're a good play there.
Okay. Favorite stack, both of you. We'll start with you, Tuttle.
I'll give 2. Chalky-ish stack or chalkier stack. It's the Seattle passing attack. Bring it back with Hayden Hurst or Calvin Ridley. Potentially less chalky, potentially still a little bit of ownership. I do like the Carolina Panthers in that game in general, like I keep saying. So Teddy Bridgewater, DJ Moore, Curtis Samuel, and then bring it back with a Bryan Edwards or Henry Ruggs or even a Josh Jacobs.
Christy, your favorite stacks?
Yeah, I agree. I have a lot of interest, of course, in the Seattle-Atlanta game. I think that's, one of the favorite games of the week for sure. And then a couple other ones. I actually have a little bit of interest in that Chargers game too. I think, with Eckler and, getting maybe Tyrod Taylor at cheaper, quarterback position there, you've got some good weapons there. I know Mike Williams is playing today, but you've got Keenan Allen and you've got some good weapons there, and bring it back with Mixon or whatnot. So that's something else too that I have some interest in.
Okay. How about favorite play of the day? Both of you. Favorite, Christy, what is your very favorite? You're like, when you plug this guy in every lineup, you're like, ooh, yeah, I like that.
Well, I mean, it's really hard for me to get away, and this is very chalky, but I mean, Christian McCaffrey, that was one of the first guys that I've obviously locked in, but, another guy that I really like and I guess really on both sites because of the price. I'm pretty high on Deshaun Jackson today too. So on the receiver side.
Okay, Tuttle, you got a guy?
Yeah, this isn't for cash. Although he's not that bad of a play, but I'm on the let Russ cook bandwagon. So I'm going to go with Russell Wilson as the play of the day.
Okay, excellent stuff. We've got 4 minutes or so. We can take some questions here. So let's do it. Dennis Kelly says, Swift or Clement, 20-person league.
I would take Clement there.
Also, Matt says Tuttle is smart and Christy is sharp. I don't know if there's a difference there, but I believe that's a compliment for both of you. So there you
We'll
have
take
it. Yeah.
That's right.
AVZ says Washington, and I believe he's asking as a stack.
Defense, yes. I'm personally not a huge fan of the stack. They have some playable guys, I guess, McLaren and Antonio Gibson. Yeah. But
okay.
I don't know about a full-out stack.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. Couple good pieces, but yeah, not a stack.
All right. Christy Madison says DK GPP, Tyrod and Eckler, or Matt Ryan and DK Metcalf.
I kind of like the Tyrod Eckler. I really do. I'm pretty high on him today and think he has a great price on DK in particular.
Okay. Matt says, what's your best car stack?
I think you throw them out with both receivers. So Brian Edwards and Henry Ruggs.
All right. Joe says, this is half PPR, Odell, Ruggs, or Parker?
For half point PPR?
Yep.
I would say Odell.
All right. Anthony Washington is curious if you would play Brady or Garoppolo, Tuttle.
Neither are particularly high on my list. I'll give a slight edge to actually Jimmy G there.
All right. From the Discord, Allen or Robinson and DK Cash, Christy?
Keenan Allen or Robinson? I would say Robinson.
Okay. J3 says, how much volume do you think AJ gets? Is it worth it in cash?
I don't think it's worth it in cash.
Talking AJ Green? Green? Yeah, no, not worth it in cash.
Yeah, not in cash. Yeah.
All right. Adam says, Rager or Edelman? Tuttle?
Not on either, but if this is like a season-long question, I guess I'd go Edelman.
All right. Robbie says DK Cash. Gibson a top play in cash?
I think he's in consideration because of his price. I think he's 4,000. So yeah, I think he's a good play.
All right. Matt says, is CMC the cheapest he will be all year? Tuttle?
No.
Oh,
we'll see him cheaper.
Okay, you're gonna need him to have like a bad week this week for him to get cheaper.
I think he'll get like, I don't think he's gonna smash. I'll put him at like 20 to 25 points, which is obviously good, but not mega smash.
AVZ says, is anyone watching San Francisco for smoke news? I think we all are. I mentioned this off the top. I looked at the air quality earlier and it looked to be decently below the 200 level, which would have them cancel it. I am not a smoke fire expert, so I'm not entirely sure, but I am operating under the assumption they are going to play. Jay says, hey, thanks, guys. Good luck week one. That was great content. You're welcome. Madison says, DK, GPP, Eckler and Hurst, or Julio and Doyle. Christy?
I'd say Eckler and Hurst.
Okay. How much of my money, how should I spend my money after winning the Millie? I don't know why it took me that long to read that. You just start max entering every single tournament after that until the Millie's gone.
That's the thing not to do.
Yeah.
That's the thing not to do. Yeah, exactly.
Do not go enter the heavy hitter for 26 grand the next slate.
Do not do that. Hey, we have hit the lock, guys. I thought I could read you the lineup that I built during this show. And you could tell me if this is the most garbage lineup you've ever heard in your life. And come clean. Like, I don't mind. Okay. You can let me know if this is trash. All right. Starting it off with the guy who right at the end of the show, Tuttle was like, no, I really don't like him. So that's a great start. We got Brady.
Okay.
We got Kamara. We got Scott. We got Godwin. See, there's a little game stack. Got a little Godwin. We got Marvin Jones, Scary Terry, Gronk, DJ Shark, and the Jets defense.
It's
Did
not
you say
drawing
this is
dead.
DK?
Yes, this is DK.
DK.
So what is wrong with it? Tell me what I did wrong in that, because I know I did a lot wrong. There's no doubt.
I mean, it's not that bad.
Do you have a receiver in flex?
Yeah, I personally would not.
I'd maybe do a running back. I'd do a running back there.
You would do a running back in the flex. I guess that's from now on, that's a question that we're going to go over is what should we do in that flex position?
Yeah.
It's not the worst week to do a receiver, but if I'm doing a receiver, it probably wouldn't be Shark.
Yeah.
Does that guy suck? I was like, that's where I landed.
Doesn't.
All right.
No, he
He's
doesn't, but it's
play.
just, yeah.
Hammer says, Roth, did you pick that lineup out of a hat? Yes. Essentially, yes, I did. I did indeed. Oh.
Yeah, I thought you factored in weather.
I did, but Shark is in Jacksonville, and I'm not that concerned about Jacksonville.
Okay.
It's the Buffalo game where I'm avoiding. But everyone knows if I somehow win the Millie with this, everyone's gonna be like, you were telling people the weather was gonna be bad in Jacksonville just so you could have the ownership on Shark. All right. Well, let's see. We can take some afterlot questions. I'm trying to work on secondary stacks. Is that something that you both try to do? So you've got like, your primary game stack, and then are both of you actively trying to work in a secondary stack, Christy?
I would say I do. It's not like I have to have that in my main lineup. I mean, I kind of build it on the stack that I like initially. And if I can get it to work out where I find a couple players that I like going in a second stack that I like, I do like to work that in. But it's the most important thing is to find one stack that I feel good with, and then kind of figure in the pieces from there.
Tuttle, what is your build process?
Yeah, same thing. Main stack first. If a secondary stack fits, yeah, love it. But not something I'll absolutely force.
Okay,
Right.
I absolutely forced it. I was like, I read something a year ago that was like, oh, you got to have a secondary stack. And now I try to force it every time. Alex says T.Y. Hilton is about to go crazy. He said it 4 times. So he's really thinks he's going to go crazy. Any interest in T.Y. Hilton?
I do. And I think I actually wrote him up as I had to write up 6 GPP plays for FanDuel in specific. And TY was one of them. I just think he's overlooked this week. He's, $6,400. His price is right. And he can be very explosive, as we all know.
Yeah, that does seem like a good price. Let's see. Banks says, hey, what do you think about the Washington team tight end position?
Yeah, I mentioned him. I mentioned Logan Thomas as a potential cheap option.
Boy, just feel like I just didn't spend enough time. I entered all these contests and then I just flushed it all away. This is poor bankroll management is what I feel like just happened. Let's see. MB, Gibson, Robinson, or Singletary? Christy?
Gibson, Robinson, or Singletary? I think I would take actually Gibson, just, factoring the price in there and everything.
And they're stuck no matter what now because it's locked.
Oh, all right.
Locked.
It's too late to do anything about that.
The bad thing, Roth is in baseball mode. The thing with football is we only have 3 late games. So
Right.
90% of the games lock, and
Not a whole lot of
you can
late
do
swap
about it.
questions, unless you're a donkey like me and tried to late stack the Tom Brady game. Alex says, would update on the AQI? There's no update to be had. Like, I'll tweet something after the show, but
Yeah, you got to keep an eye on Twitter all day, basically.
yeah, that's pretty much how it's going to happen. I'm not ready to go yet, guys. I'm not ready to go. Have the games kicked off yet?
You don't want to go and watch them? Yeah.
No.
Let's
I'm
kick
gonna,
off. This isn't basketball where we have to wait 15 minutes after the start time.
why is it that this is the only sport that actually this is the start time, this is when we're playing? This is the way it should be.
I will say, I ran Curtis Samuel in the 450 on FanDuel, and I just brought it up. 0.3% ownership on Curtis Samuel. So
Wow.
hoping he has a big game.
That'll do it for you. I have 1 entry in the Millie. How many were you allowed to have? Because I know it was only $5.
150.
You're allowed to have 150?
Yep.
Did we max that out?
I did not personally.
Christy?
For the one on DraftKings?
Yeah.
I did max that one out this week. I usually don't, but I thought, oh, we'll give it a shot.
Yeah,
this
you get
week.
the $5. It's hard not to.
Yeah, it's like whew,
absolutely.
$5. That's pretty good. All right. Well, obviously, guys, I am pulling for you as I feel I am already drawn dead. Next time, I will listen to your advice before the show. I will feel a little bit better about my lineup. But that was awesome. I feel like I learned a lot just in those 30 minutes. A lot of people, by the way, jumping in saying, hey, great show. Congratulations. This is from Andre, by the way, in chat real quick. Supposedly the air quality was at 121 from a reporter at the stadium an hour ago, and Schefter said the game will play.
Okay.
So hopefully, obviously, that's just a random person in our chat that said that, but it'd be pretty messed up to mislead people, and it seems pretty specific. So I trust him. I believe it.
Absolutely.
Let's say goodbye to the people. Usually, if it's a 3-man booth, I just say the goodbyes. But Christy, as you are new here, I think you should lead off the goodbyes.
Hey, well, thanks for letting me. I did my first show for football. Had an absolute blast. Looking forward to doing this season. And I think we had a great first show. Thanks, everyone.
I agree. Crushed it. Tuttle, say goodbye to the people.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to lie. I really liked the earlier start last year with the shows I was on, but I think this will be good for me because I didn't have the ability to tweak lineups during the show.
Yeah,
and so I think no tinkering, I think, is good.
Right. That is
absolutely
excellent. Yeah. All right, guys. Hey, we appreciate you. We love you. Thank you for hanging out with us. We're going to do this every week, and it's just going to get better every week. We're just going to blend and gel. It's going to be amazing. So we will see you next week. We'll catch you next time. You have been crunched.